The rain hammered the single-pane window of Bachelor Enlisted Quarters Building 47 like small arms fire. Staff Sergeant Leah Monroe, though no one here knew that rank or any rank she'd actually held, pressed her palm against the cold glass and counted the drops. 47 in 3 seconds, 126 in 10. Her mind still did this, quantified everything, measured, calculated threat probabilities from environmental data. The math was useless now. "Hey, transfer." The voice came from the doorway. Monroe didn't turn. She knew the voice belonged to Petty Officer Second Class Jennifer Hayworth, one of the 3 women in the admin pool who'd made the last 6 days a case study in institutional cruelty, disguised as hazing. "You planning to stare at rain all night? Or you gonna finish those requisition forms Gunny wants by 600? Monroe turned slowly. Hayworth leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, that particular smile playing at her lips, the one that said, "I know you're beneath me, and I'm enjoying it." 24 years old, maybe. Enlisted for 4. Never deployed outside the continental U.S. Wearing her uniform like costume jewelry. "I'll have them done," Monroe said. Her voice came out flat, effectless. That was new too. This monotone that had replaced whatever personality she'd once had. The neurologist at Walter Reed had a term for it. Emotional blunting, secondary to diffuse axonal injury. The words meant her brain had been scrambled like eggs in a shell, and the parts that made her sound human hadn't survived the cooking. "You better." Hayworth pushed off the frame. "Gunny's already on edge. Last thing he needs is another useless transfer fucking up his workflow." She paused, ran her eyes over Monroe with theatrical assessment. "Though I gotta say, you look like you'd fuck up a coffee order. What did you do to get sent here anyway? Sleep with someone's husband?" The other 2, Petty Officer Third Class Rodriguez and Seaman Chen, laughed from their bunks. Hayworth fed off it, energized by an audience. "I mean, you got that whole I need rescuing vibe. Bet that worked great wherever you were before. But this is Naval Station Kitsap Bangor, honey. We actually work here." Monroe's jaw tightened. For half a second, less, maybe a quarter second, the time it took a 338 Lapua round to travel 800 meters, she saw herself moving. 3 steps, inside Hayworth's guard, elbow strike to the solar plexus, follow through to drive her into the wall. Textbook close quarters disable. The kind of thing she'd done so many times in so many places that the muscle memory lived deeper than conscious thought. Instead, she said, "I'll get the forms done." Hayworth's smile widened. "That's what I thought." The door closed. Monroe waited until she heard footsteps recede down the corridor before releasing her breath. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear. She'd lost the capacity for normal fear somewhere around her 4th deployment, but from the effort of restraint, from the constant grinding dissonance between what her body knew how to do and what this new life demanded she never do again. She walked to the metal desk shoved against the wall. Government issue, scarred by decades of transient personnel. Someone had carved, "Fuck this place," into the corner. Monroe ran her finger over the words, felt the grooves. Whoever carved them was long gone. Probably sitting in some living room right now. Civilian clothes, beer in hand, war stories getting softer at the edges every time they were told. The requisition forms were a joke. Requests for office supplies, printer paper, staples, toner cartridges. The kind of thing an E1 could handle in 15 minutes. But Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Webb had a system, and his system required that every form be filled out in triplicate, with justification memos for requests exceeding $50, cross-referenced against the quarterly budget, and submitted through a chain of approval that involved 4 different people who all hated each other. Monroe had seen supply chains in Helmand Province run more efficiently while under mortar fire. She picked up the pen. Government-issue ballpoint, the kind that stopped working if you thought too hard about it. Her handwriting was worse now than before. The TBI had done something to her fine motor control. Nothing dramatic, just enough that letters tilted wrong. Words wandered off their lines. Doctors said it might improve. They said a lot of things might improve, always with that might hovering in the air like smoke. Request, printer paper, 10 reams. Justification, current supply projected to deplete within 2 weeks, given average daily usage of... Her phone buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket. Personal phone, not the duty phone she'd been issued that morning. A text from an unknown number. "How's the vacation?" Monroe stared at the message for 30 seconds. The number wasn't unknown. She knew exactly who it was. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, last seen in a hospital bed at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center, left leg held together with enough titanium to set off metal detectors for life. They'd served together. Not here. Not in this world where requisition forms mattered and petty officers could make your life hell because you didn't fight back. She typed, "Surviving." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Call if you need to talk." Monroe deleted the thread. She didn't call people anymore. Talking required energy she didn't have, required her to fake emotion she couldn't access, required her to pretend that the distance between who she'd been and who she was now wasn't a gulf she'd never cross. The forms took 3 hours. By the time she finished, her head was pounding, the kind of headache that felt like someone had replaced her skull with a size too small. Light sensitivity, the neurologist said. Photophobia, another gift from the blast that had rearranged her brain. She turned off the overhead light and sat in the dark. Outside, the rain had stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. Sleep didn't come. It rarely did. She lay on the narrow bunk and stared at the ceiling, counting tiles. 47. Same as the drops on the window. Same as the number of people who'd walked out of that compound in Kandahar because she'd made a choice no one should have to make. 47 saved. 2 dead. The math never changed. At 0545, Monroe walked to the admin building. Naval Station Kitsap Bangor sprawled across the Kitsap Peninsula like a small city, submarine base, logistics hub, strategic weapons facility Pacific, home to 8 Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines and enough nuclear warheads to end civilization several times over. The base operated on 2 speeds, carefully planned routine and barely controlled chaos. This morning was routine. She entered building 2471, 3rd floor, suite C. The office smelled like burnt coffee and institutional defeat. 6 desks crammed into a space designed for 4, filing cabinets blocking the emergency exit, a printer that had been on out-of-paper status since Monroe arrived. Gunny Webb sat at the corner desk, reading something on his computer with the intensity of a man looking for reasons to be angry. He was 32, a lifer who'd made gunnery sergeant through attrition rather than merit. His uniform was perfect, creases sharp enough to cut, ribbons aligned with micrometer precision. But his eyes had that quality Monroe recognized from 100 mediocre officers, the fear of being found out. "Requisition forms," she said, placing the stack on his desk. Webb didn't look up. "You're late." "It's 0549, Gunny. You said 600. Early is on time is late." He grabbed the forms, flipped through them with theatrical speed. "What's this?" "The forms you asked for." "Did I ask for half-assed work?" He held up the top sheet, pointed at a line. "Your handwriting looks like a 3rd grader with Parkinson's. Redo them." Monroe's jaw tightened. "The content is accurate." "The content." Webb set the papers down, finally looked at her. "Transfer, let me explain something. I don't know what low-speed unit you came from, or what you did to get pawned off on me, but here's how it works in my office. When I give you a task, you do it to my standards. Not yours. Mine. And my standards don't include chicken scratch that looks like you filled them out during an earthquake." Hayworth snickered from her desk. Rodriguez joined in. Chen pretended to be focused on her computer screen, but Monroe could see the smile. "I can print them," Monroe said. "If legibility is—" "Oh, you can print them. How gracious." Webb leaned back in his chair. "No, transfer. You're going to rewrite them. By hand. And you're going to do it during your lunch break because clearly your evenings are too precious." Monroe stood very still, a thing she'd learned. When you couldn't fight back, you went somewhere else in your head. You built a room with thick walls, and you stepped inside and you closed the door, and you let your body handle the humiliation while the real you waited in the dark. "Yes, Gunny." "Good. Now get started on those supply closet inventories, and try not to fuck those up." She walked to her desk. It was the one closest to the broken air conditioning vent, which meant she spent half the day freezing and half the day suffocating. Someone, probably Hayworth, had moved her chair to the one with the broken hydraulics, so sitting required perching at an angle that made her back scream within an hour. The supply closet inventory was busy work. Count pens, count folders, count boxes of paper clips. The Navy had entire warehouses dedicated to items that cost pennies, guarded with the intensity of nuclear secrets. She grabbed the clipboard and headed down the hall. The closet was a 10 by 10 room with no windows and a door that stuck. Monroe wedged herself inside and closed the door. The silence wrapped around her like a blanket. For the first time since arriving at Kitsap, she could breathe without calculating how many people were watching. She started counting. Her brain liked this. Simple, quantifiable, no room for interpretation. 12 pens, blue. 8 pens, black. 4 highlighters, yellow. She wrote each number with careful precision, forming letters that wouldn't give Webb ammunition. The headache was building again. She closed her eyes, pressed her palms against them. White spots bloomed in the darkness. The neurologist called them phosphenies, a side effect of the pressure change in her brain. She called them ghosts of the explosion that had rewired her skull. You were 300 meters from the blast, the doctor had said, showing her scans that looked like Rorschach tests. Your brain hit the front of your skull at approximately 50 miles per hour, then rebounded. The axonal shearing created thousands of microscopic tears. You're lucky to be alive. Lucky. That word again, used by people who weren't there, who didn't know that luck was just another word for survivor's guilt, wrapped in medical terminology. Someone knocked on the door. Monroe opened her eyes. Occupied. It's me. Rodriguez's voice. Gunny wants you. Monroe set down the clipboard and opened the door. Rodriguez stood in the hallway, arms crossed, expression neutral, but eyes carrying that particular gleam that meant trouble. Conference room. Now. The conference room was windowless, claustrophobic, dominated by a table designed for 12 people forced to accommodate 8. Webb sat at the head, Hayworth and Chen flanking him like lieutenants. The base's administrative officer, a lieutenant commander named Bradley, who looked like he'd majored in disappointment, sat to Webb's right. Sit, Webb said, gesturing to the chair at the opposite end. The distance was calculated, far enough to make her feel isolated, close enough that everyone could watch. Monroe sat, waited. Webb slid a folder across the table. It stopped precisely in front of her. These are your performance evaluations from your previous command. Monroe didn't reach for the folder. She knew what was inside. Or rather, she knew what wasn't inside. Any record of the previous 15 years, any mention of the places she'd been, the things she'd done, the reason her medical records had more redactions than actual text. They're thin, Webb continued. In fact, I'd call them suspiciously thin. 2 pages for 6 years of service. Care to explain? Personnel records are handled above my pay grade, Gunny. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Bradley leaned forward. Staff Sergeant, we're trying to understand where you fit in this command. Your file suggests administrative support, but your evaluations lack specificity. No major awards. No deployment ribbons visible on your uniform. No clear specialty. You're essentially a ghost in the system. Ghost. The word hit differently than Bradley intended. Monroe's old call sign, the name people used when they couldn't use her real one, when she was operating in places that officially didn't exist with people who officially didn't exist. Phantom, or sometimes just ghost. Clean, efficient, gone, before you realized she'd been there. I'm administrative support, Monroe said, as assigned. You see, that's the thing. Webb picked up a pen, tapped it against the folder. Administrative support personnel don't usually have medical separation paperwork stamped temporary duty assignment pending review, which, unless I'm misreading Navy bureaucracy, and I assure you I'm not, means you're here because someone wanted you somewhere quiet while they figured out what to do with you. Hayworth smiled. Chen looked uncomfortable. Rodriguez examined her fingernails. I'm here to work, Gunny. Whatever needs doing. What needs doing, Webb said slowly, is for you to not be a drain on my office's efficiency. What needs doing is for you to prove you're not just taking up space while collecting a paycheck. Monroe kept her face neutral. Inside the room with thick walls, she was screaming. Outside, she nodded. Understood. I don't think you do. Webb stood, walked around the table. He stopped behind her chair, just outside her peripheral vision. A dominance move, probably learned from some leadership book that confused intimidation with command. See, I've got a tight ship here. Everyone pulls their weight. Everyone understands the standard. And then you show up with your incomplete file and your mystery paperwork, and suddenly I'm supposed to just accommodate you. I haven't asked for accommodation. Your existence is accommodation. His voice was close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath. You want to fit in here? Earn it. Prove you're worth the oxygen you're breathing. Monroe stood slowly, deliberately, turned to face him. They were the same height, 5'8", average for women in the military, but she carried herself differently. Every movement economical, balanced, centered in a way that came from training most people never received. For half a second, Webb's eyes registered something. Not fear, exactly, but recognition that the power dynamic wasn't as simple as he'd assumed. Then Monroe dropped her eyes. Submitted. Yes, Gunny. The moment passed. Webb's confidence reasserted itself. Good. Dismissed. And transfer? Next time I call you to a meeting, you better move faster. Lunch was a protein bar eaten standing in the supply closet, door wedged shut with a folding chair. Monroe chewed mechanically, staring at the inventory list. Her handwriting looked worse in the afternoon light. The letters wandered, collapsed into each other, betrayed the fact that her brain sometimes forgot how to send signals to her hand. She'd been a sniper once, could put 3 rounds through a playing card at 800 meters. Now she couldn't write a sentence without it looking like a ransom note. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Chen. You still surviving? Monroe typed, define surviving. This time Chen called. Monroe almost didn't answer, but the supply closet was dark and quiet, and the sound of another human voice, someone who knew, who understood, was suddenly necessary. Hey, Monroe said, you sound like shit. Chen's voice was warm, familiar, carrying the faint slur that came from pain medication and damaged nerves. Which means you're probably doing what I did, pretending everything's fine while dying inside. I'm fine. Liar. You're at Kitsap, right? Admin duty? How did you know? I made some calls, pulled some strings, wanted to make sure they weren't completely fucking you over. A pause. Are they? Monroe closed her eyes. It's administrative duty. Pretty hard to fuck up filing. Come on, Leah. It's me. What's really happening? The use of her first name, her real first name, not the rank or call sign, made something crack in Monroe's chest. She hadn't heard it in months. Everyone here called her transfer, or hey you, or staff sergeant if they were being formally contemptuous. They don't know, Monroe said quietly. About before, about any of it. And you can't tell them. No. So they treat you like shit because they think you're nobody. Yes. Chen was silent for a long moment. I'm sorry. Don't be. This was the deal. Medical separation, temporary assignment, administrative duty until they figure out what to do with someone who's too broken for the field, but too classified to discharge normally. You're not broken. I can't write in a straight line, Sarah. I have headaches that last 3 days. Last week I forgot an entire conversation I had with my neurologist. My brain is literally full of holes. Your brain saved 47 lives. The number again. Always the number. Monroe opened her eyes, stared at the boxes of staples stacked floor to ceiling. And killed 2. That's not... I need to go. Inventory to finish. Leah, thanks for calling. She hung up before Chen could respond, stood in the dark, and breathed and counted staplers. 14. Same number as the days since she'd arrived at Kitsap. Same number of times Webb had found something to criticize. The door rattled. Transfer. Hayworth's voice. You've been in there for 45 minutes. What are you doing? Taking a nap? Monroe opened the door. Hayworth stood with 2 other women from the communications center, Petty Officer Davis and Petty Officer Martinez. They looked at Monroe the way people looked at roadkill, with that mixture of disgust and morbid curiosity. Just finishing the inventory. Right, because counting pens takes an hour. Hayworth stepped closer. You know what I think? I think you're hiding. I think you got sent here because you couldn't hack it wherever you were before, and now you're hoping if you stay invisible long enough, everyone will forget you exist. Monroe said nothing. She's not even denying it, Martinez said. Because she can't, Hayworth continued. Look at her. She's got that whole deer in headlights thing going on, like she's waiting for someone to save her. Davis laughed. Maybe she thinks Gunny's gonna suddenly realize she's special. Special needs, maybe. The laughter echoed in the small hallway. Monroe stood very still, hands at her sides, face neutral. She'd learned this skill in interrogation resistance training, how to be present in your body while your mind was somewhere else. How to let words hit you like rain, wet, cold, annoying, but ultimately just water. Anyway, Hayworth said, losing interest now that Monroe wasn't reacting. Gunny wants you in his office. Something about those forms again. Better hurry before he finds another reason to make your life hell. They walked away. Monroe listened to their footsteps fade, then returned to the supply closet, retrieved the clipboard, looked at the inventory list. 18 pages of items nobody needed, counted by someone nobody wanted. She walked back to the office. Webb was on the phone, but he gestured impatiently for her to wait. Monroe stood by his desk, counting ceiling tiles. 47. Always 47. The universe had a sense of humor. Webb hung up. The requisition forms. Still wrong. How? He slid them across the desk. They looked identical to what she'd submitted that morning. Justification section. You wrote projected need based on average usage. That's vague. I need specific usage rates. Daily consumption, weekly projection, quarterly forecast. For printer paper. For everything. Webb leaned back. This isn't hard transfer. It's basic attention to detail. If you can't handle this, I don't know what you can handle. Monroe picked up the forms. Her head was pounding again, that feeling like her brain was pressing against her skull trying to escape. I'll revise them. Tonight. I want them on my desk by 600 tomorrow. Think you can manage that without screwing up? Yes, Gunny. She returned to her desk. Hayworth was watching, that smile playing at her lips. Rodriguez whispered something to Chen, who shook her head but couldn't quite hide her own smile. The room felt very small suddenly, walls pressing in, air thick with fluorescent light and recycled hostility. Monroe sat down, picked up the pen, started over. Request. Printer paper. 10 reams. Justification. Based on current daily consumption of 83 sheets, averaged over previous 14 days. Weekly projection of 581 sheets. Monthly projection of 2,493 sheets. Quarterly projection of 7,479 sheets. Her handwriting deteriorated with each line. The letters tilted, compressed, surrendered to the tremor in her hand that she couldn't control. By page 4, she could barely read her own writing. At 17:30, everyone else left. Webb stopped by her desk. Still here? Finishing the forms. How dedicated. He didn't sound impressed. Lock up when you're done. And transfer? Maybe practice your penmanship this weekend. You write like someone having a stroke. He left. The office fell silent except for the hum of the dying fluorescent lights and the scratch of Monroe's pen against paper. Outside, the sun was setting. She could tell from the quality of light bleeding through the grimy windows, that particular gray that meant evening on the Kitsap Peninsula. She finished at 1945. 14 pages of revisions, each one documenting the projected consumption of items worth less than $1. Her hand was cramping. Her head felt like it was filled with broken glass, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice that sounded like her old self was screaming. Monroe gathered the forms, tapped them into alignment, placed them in the center of Webb's desk. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the base. Lights were coming on across the compound, street lamps, building markers, the distinctive glow of the submarine piers in the distance, billions of dollars of military hardware, thousands of personnel, multiple layers of security, all functioning because people followed orders and filed paperwork and pretended the small humiliations were somehow noble. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass, counted her breaths, 47 inhales, 47 exhales. The math never changed. That night, sleep was impossible. Monroe lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling, listening to Rodriguez snore and Chen mumble in her sleep. The headache had evolved into something with teeth, biting down on the base of her skull with rhythmic precision. She got up at 0300, dressed in PT gear, went running. The base was quiet at this hour, just the security patrols and the occasional duty watch swapping shifts. Monroe ran the perimeter road, 6 miles at a pace that would have been slow before, but now left her gasping. Her body remembered how to do this, but her brain kept misfiring, sending the wrong signals, forgetting to regulate her breathing, making her stumble on perfectly flat pavement. By mile 4, she was crying. Not from pain. She'd learned to carry pain like luggage, but from rage. At her body for breaking, at the system for not knowing what to do with her, at herself for surviving when better people hadn't. 47 saved, 2 dead. She stopped running, bent over with hands on knees, breathing in ragged gasps. Her vision swam. For a moment she wasn't on Kitsap Peninsula anymore. She was in Kandahar province, watching dust rise from rotor wash, hearing the distinctive sound of an HH-60 Pave Hawk settling into a landing zone that shouldn't have been hot but was, always was, because intelligence was always 3 steps behind reality. Phantom, we need confirmation on package status. Her voice, steady despite the chaos. 47 souls confirmed. 2 KIA, requesting immediate exfil. Copy that, Phantom. Birds inbound. Hold the line. And she had. For 17 minutes that felt like 17 years, while incoming fire turned the compound's walls into powder, and the weight of 2 dead teammates pressed against her chest like a physical thing. Monroe straightened, wiped her face. The memory faded. She was back at Kitsap, standing on a road that led nowhere important, breathing air that smelled like salt water and diesel fuel. She walked the last 2 miles back to the barracks. By the time she reached her room, the sun was rising. Weak, apologetic Pacific Northwest light that made everything look washed out. She showered, changed into her uniform, checked her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back looked tired, empty, like someone had scooped out her insides and left a uniform-shaped shell. You're a ghost, she thought, and ghosts don't get to be anything else. At 5:45, she was at her desk. The office was empty except for one person, Lieutenant Commander Bradley, the administrative officer, who looked surprised to see her. Early start, Staff Sergeant. Finishing work from yesterday, sir. Bradley nodded slowly, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. How are you settling in? The question seemed genuine, which made it dangerous. Monroe had learned that genuine questions required genuine answers, and genuine answers revealed weakness. Fine, sir. Gunny Webb giving you a fair shake? Gunny's standards are high. I'm working to meet them. That's diplomatic. Bradley glanced at Webb's desk, saw the stack of requisition forms. You know, I reviewed your file, or what passes for your file. It's unusual. Monroe kept her face neutral. I'm not sure what you mean, sir. I mean, there are gaps, lots of them. And whenever I ask bupers for clarification, I get redirected to someone else, who redirects me to someone else, who eventually tells me it's above their pay grade. He paused, which makes me think you're more interesting than you appear. I'm administrative support, sir. Nothing interesting about filing. Bradley smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Right. Well, if you need anything, if things get difficult, my door's open, metaphorically speaking. Actually, it's usually closed. But you can knock. Thank you, sir. He left. Monroe sat in the silence, staring at the forms she'd spent 3 hours perfecting. Her handwriting still looked terrible. Webb would find something wrong. He always did. At 0600, the rest of the office arrived. Hayworth made coffee. Bad coffee, the kind that tasted like punishment, and didn't offer any to Monroe. Chen turned on her computer without acknowledging Monroe's presence. Rodriguez made a joke about the weekend that Monroe didn't hear because her attention was fracturing, splitting between the present moment and the memory of another morning in another place where coffee tasted like survival. Webb arrived at 6:15, already irritated about something. He dropped his cover on the desk, grabbed the requisition forms, and began reading with the intensity of someone looking for errors, because finding errors was easier than admitting competence. Monroe watched from her desk, counted her breaths, waited. Webb's jaw tightened. He flipped to the second page, then the third. His expression shifted from anticipation to frustration to something Monroe recognized as disappointment. He'd wanted to find mistakes, needed them to confirm his narrative about her. He set the forms down. These are acceptable. Not good, not well done. Acceptable. The word hung in the air like an insult. Thank you, Gunny. Don't thank me. This is the standard I expect going forward. No more half-assing. He picked up the forms, carried them to the filing cabinet. Hayworth, get transfer started on the supply request consolidation. Rodriguez, you're with me for the morning briefing. Chen, figure out why the printer's been offline for 3 days. Everyone else, act like you have a purpose. The day began. Monroe worked through a stack of supply requests, cross-referencing them against budget codes and approval workflows. The task required sustained attention, which meant every 15 minutes her brain tried to wander off somewhere else. She'd read the same line 6 times before realizing she hadn't processed any of it. At 1000, her phone vibrated. Another text from Chen. Your old unit is on the news. You should see this. Monroe opened her phone's browser, navigated to the news site. The headline made her chest tighten. Retired SEAL Team Commander indicted for classified information breach. The article was careful, dancing around specifics, but Monroe could read between the lines. Someone from her old command, probably someone senior, someone with access, had talked to the wrong people about the wrong operations, which meant investigations, which meant scrutiny of everyone who'd been involved, which meant her file, as thin as it was, might become a problem. She closed the browser, stared at the supply requests. The letters looked like hieroglyphics suddenly, meaningless symbols arranged in patterns she couldn't decode. "You okay?" The voice came from beside her. Monroe looked up. Bradley was standing there, expression concerned. "You look pale." "I'm fine, sir." "You don't look fine. You look like you saw a ghost." "I am a ghost," Monroe thought. "That's the whole problem. Just a headache, sir. Nothing serious." Bradley studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. "Take a break if you need to. And Monroe, whatever's in your past, whatever you think you're hiding, it doesn't change the fact that you're here now. And here, you're just another sailor trying to do her job. Remember that." He walked away before Monroe could respond. She sat very still, processing his words. Whatever's in your past. He knew. Not the details. Those were buried under so many layers of classification that even admirals couldn't access them. But he knew she wasn't what she appeared to be. The question was whether that knowledge would help or hurt her. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. At 1200, Monroe took her lunch break, another protein bar, this time eaten at her desk because the supply closet felt too much like a hiding place. Hayworth and the others went to the cafeteria, their laughter carrying down the hall long after they disappeared. Monroe was halfway through her protein bar when the building's fire alarm went off. The sound was piercing, designed to be impossible to ignore. Monroe stood automatically, muscle memory taking over. Assess situation, identify exits, account for personnel. But the office was empty. Just her. She grabbed her phone, headed for the stairs. Other people were evacuating too, flowing down the stairwells in orderly chaos. Monroe let herself be carried by the crowd, counting faces instinctively. 32 people from this floor. None injured, none panicking. Probably a drill. Outside, the rain had started again. Personnel clustered under the building's overhang, while safety officers with high-vis vests directed people away from the structure. Monroe spotted Webb standing with Bradley and the building's fire marshal, all of them looking annoyed rather than concerned. "False alarm," someone said. "Third one this month." Monroe moved to the edge of the crowd, away from the center. Being visible made her nervous in ways she couldn't articulate. Old habits. Stay on the periphery, keep your back to a wall, maintain situational awareness without drawing attention. She was scanning the crowd, old habit checking for threats that didn't exist, when her phone buzzed. Another text, not from Chen this time, from a number she definitely didn't recognize. "Storm coming. Bigger than you think. Be ready." Monroe stared at the message, deleted it, but the words stayed with her the rest of the day, long after the all-clear sounded and everyone trudged back inside to resume their busy work. Storm coming. The rain hammered harder against the windows. Monroe returned to her desk and pretended to care about supply requests while her brain ran probability calculations she couldn't shut off. Something was changing. She could feel it in the air, in the way Bradley looked at her, in the cryptic message from a number that shouldn't exist. 47 tiles on the ceiling, 47 lives saved. The math was about to change. The storm arrived on Thursday at 1400 hours. Not the metaphorical storm Monroe had been anticipating since the cryptic text, but an actual Pacific weather system. Category 3, winds gusting to 70 miles per hour, bringing rain that fell sideways and turned the base into an obstacle course of flooding and fallen branches. Monroe was filing budget reports when the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the building went dark, except for the emergency lighting that made everything look like a horror movie set. "Great," Hayworth muttered from her desk. "Just what we need." Webb's voice cut through the darkness. "Everyone stay calm. Power'll be back in a minute." But the power didn't come back. After 5 minutes, Bradley appeared in the doorway with a flashlight. "Generator's not kicking on. We're switching to backup communications protocol. Webb, get your people to the comm center. We need to establish contact with the sub-peers and make sure they're secured." "Yes, sir." Webb started directing traffic. "Hayworth Rodriguez, you're with me. Chen, coordinate with IT. Transfer." He stopped, seeming to remember Monroe existed. "Transfer, you stay here. Answer phones if power comes back." "Gunny, I can help with—" "Did I ask for input?" Webb's voice had an edge now, sharpened by stress and the opportunity to exercise authority. "You stay here. That's an order." They left. Monroe stood in the dim emergency lighting, listening to the wind howl against the windows. Rain hammered the glass with percussion that reminded her too much of other sounds, other times. She walked to the window. Outside, the base was barely visible through the deluge. She could see emergency vehicles moving, their lights cutting through the gray. Standard protocol for severe weather. Secure the submarines, protect the weapons facilities, make sure nothing critical was exposed. Her phone buzzed. The number from earlier. Comm center needs you. They just don't know it yet. Monroe stared at the message, deleted it, tried to convince herself it was spam, some random glitch. But the timing was too precise. Someone was watching. Someone knew more than they should. She made a decision that probably violated several orders. She grabbed her cover, headed for the stairs. The comm center was in building 2477, 3 buildings over. Monroe ran through the rain, her uniform soaked through in seconds. The wind tried to knock her sideways. She leaned into it, using body mechanics learned in worse conditions than this. Building 2477's entrance was crowded with personnel trying to coordinate the weather response. Monroe slipped through, took the stairs to the 3rd floor. The comm center doors were propped open, revealing controlled chaos. A dozen people shouting into radios and phones, trying to maintain contact with various elements of the base. Webb was in the center of it, arguing with someone about satellite uplink priorities. Hayworth and Rodriguez were at adjacent stations, both looking overwhelmed. No one noticed Monroe enter. She scanned the room with the efficiency of long practice. 8 communication stations, 5 actively manned. 3 emergency radios on the back wall. 1 satellite uplink terminal in the corner, displaying an error message that made Monroe's stomach tighten. Signal lost. Attempting reconnection. The problem was obvious to anyone who'd spent time in field communications. The satellite dish on the roof was either damaged or misaligned by the wind. Without it, the base couldn't coordinate with naval assets at sea, including the submarines that were probably trying to report their status. Monroe moved to the satellite terminal. No one stopped her. Everyone was too busy freaking out about the immediate crisis to notice one more body in the room. She pulled up the diagnostic screen. The interface was different from what she'd used in the field, but the underlying architecture was similar enough. Error codes scrolled past. Lots of jargon that basically meant, "We can't see the sky anymore." Transfer. Webb's voice, sharp and angry. "What the hell are you doing here?" Monroe didn't look up from the terminal. "Your satellite uplink is down. You need to realign the dish." "I know it's down. What I don't know is why you're touching equipment you're not authorized to touch." "Because no one else is fixing it." Monroe pulled up the dish control interface. The antenna was 40 degrees off target, probably blown by the wind. The system kept trying to autocorrect, but the wind speed was defeating the motors. "Step away from that terminal. Now." "Gunny, I can fix this." "I said step away." Webb moved closer, his face red with combination of stress and fury. "You're here to file paperwork, not play tech support. Get back to the office before I write you up for insubordination." Monroe's jaw tightened. "You have 4 submarines trying to communicate their status. If you don't reestablish satellite uplink in the next 10 minutes, you'll lose contact completely. And you know this how? Because you've got some magical insight the rest of us lack? Because I've done this before." The words came out before Monroe could stop them. Webb's eyes narrowed. "Done what before exactly? Filed paperwork? Because that's all your file says you're qualified for." Monroe said nothing. In the background, someone shouted, "Sir, USS Nevada is requesting emergency contact. They've got a situation." Bradley's voice cut through the chaos. "What kind of situation?" "Medical emergency on board. They need medevac coordination, but we can't maintain signal long enough to get details." The room's energy shifted. Medical emergency on a submarine meant potential casualty, which meant the Navy's bureaucratic machine would suddenly care very much about who did what and when. Bradley turned to Webb. "Gunny, I need options." Webb hesitated. Monroe could see the calculation in his eyes. He didn't know how to fix the satellite, didn't want to admit it, didn't want to let Monroe do it because that would mean admitting she was more capable than he'd allowed. Pride versus practicality. The eternal military dilemma. "We've got techs on call," Webb said finally. "They'll be here in 20 minutes. "We might not have 20 minutes, Bradley said. "That sailor might not have 20 minutes. Monroe stepped forward. "Sir, I can realign the dish from here. It'll take 3 minutes if you let me work." Bradley looked at her, then at Webb. "Gunny." "Sir, Staff Sergeant Monroe isn't certified for—" "I don't care about certifications right now. I care about getting that signal back." Bradley turned to Monroe. "Do it." Monroe didn't wait for Webb to object again. She accessed the dish control interface, checked the wind speed data, calculated the optimal position accounting for the storm's vectors. Her hands moved across the keyboard with muscle memory that had nothing to do with filing requisition forms. "You're going to overload the motors," Webb said. "That dish can't—" The dish can handle 45-degree corrections and winds up to 80 miles per hour. Current conditions are within parameters. Monroe executed the realignment sequence, compensating for atmospheric interference, redirecting power from secondary systems to boost signal strength, locking position with manual override to prevent auto-correction from fighting the wind. The terminal beeped. One line of text appeared. Signal acquired. Uplink stable. The room went quiet. Then someone shouted, "Contact re-established. Nevada is coming through." Bradley moved to the main communication station. Monroe stepped back, heart pounding, not from exertion. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled, but from the realization of what she'd just done. She'd shown competence. In this place where mediocrity was camouflage, competence was a target. Webb was staring at her with an expression somewhere between shock and rage. "Where the hell did you learn that?" Monroe met his eyes. Previous assignment. Previous assignment doing what? Communication support. The lie came easily, worn smooth by repetition. "Sir." Bradley finished coordinating with Nevada, then turned to face the room. "Situation stabilized. Medical team is being scrambled. Good work, everyone." His eyes found Monroe. "Especially you, Staff Sergeant. That was impressive." "Just doing my job, sir." "Your job is filing." Webb interjected. "Not unauthorized equipment access." "Her job," Bradley said quietly, "is whatever I say it is, Gunny. And right now I'm saying she did exactly what needed doing." He looked at Monroe again. "You're staying here until the storm passes. We might need you again." Webb's jaw worked silently. Then, "Yes, sir." The rest of the afternoon was a masterclass in controlled chaos. The storm intensified, knocking out power to 2 more buildings and damaging a transformer near the submarine piers. Monroe stayed at the satellite terminal, monitoring the uplink, making minor adjustments as wind conditions shifted. She could feel Webb watching her from across the room, his anger a physical presence. At 16:30, Hayworth approached. "So you're like a tech specialist or something?" Monroe didn't look up from the terminal. "I know some things." "That's not an answer." "It's the answer you're getting." Hayworth crossed her arms. "You know, I thought you were just some sad case taking up space. But now I'm thinking you're playing some kind of game, like pretending to be useless so you don't have to work." Monroe's hands paused on the keyboard. "You think I want to be here? I think you want something. I just can't figure out what. I want to do my job and be left alone." "Yeah, well." Hayworth leaned against the desk. "Good luck with that." Gunny's pissed, like really pissed. He doesn't like being shown up, especially not by someone he's been treating like dirt for a week. "I didn't show him up. I fixed a problem." Same thing in his world. Hayworth straightened. "Anyway, thought you should know. Watch your back." She walked away. Monroe returned to the terminal, but her hands were shaking now, not from stress, but from adrenaline finally catching up. She'd been running on autopilot for hours, muscle memory and training overriding the constant static in her head. Now the static was back, louder than before. The headache bloomed behind her eyes. She closed them, pressed her palms against her temples. White spots danced in the darkness. The neurologist's voice echoed in her memory. "The headaches will get worse with stress. You need to avoid high-pressure situations." Monroe almost laughed. Avoid high-pressure situations. Right, because that was an option when you were military. "You okay?" Chen's voice, surprisingly gentle. Monroe opened her eyes. Chen stood beside her, holding a bottle of water. "You look like you're about to pass out." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're pale as a ghost." Chen stopped, seemed to realize the implication. "Sorry. Bad metaphor." Monroe took the water. "Thanks. That thing you did, with the satellite, that was pretty badass. It was basic troubleshooting." "Basic, right." Chen smiled slightly. "Look, I don't know your story. I don't know why you're here or what you did before, but whatever it wasn't filing paperwork." Monroe drank the water, buying time. "My file says, your file says a lot of nothing." Which is weird because people with nothing to hide usually have files full of boring details. Chen lowered her voice. "I'm not asking you to tell me anything. I'm just saying, be careful. Gunny's already on your case. If he thinks you're hiding something big, he'll make it his mission to find out what." "I'm not hiding anything." "Okay." Chen didn't sound convinced. "Well, I'm hiding that I ate Rodriguez's lunch earlier, so we've all got our secrets." She left. Monroe sat alone at the terminal, watching error codes scroll past. The storm was supposed to last another 6 hours. 6 hours of being useful, being visible, being something. instead of nothing. And then tomorrow, back to filing, back to being transfer, back to pretending the last 15 years hadn't happened. Her phone buzzed. The mysterious number again. Impressive, but you're not finished yet. Monroe deleted the message, stared at the blank screen. Who was watching her? And more importantly, why? At 1800, Bradley ordered food brought in. Pizza from the base exchange, soggy from the rain but still edible. Monroe ate standing up, watching the satellite feed. The link was stable now, strong enough that the base could maintain full communications with its deployed assets. Crisis averted. Webb approached, holding his own slice of pizza. He stood beside Monroe without speaking, his silence more aggressive than any words. Finally, you lied to me. Monroe swallowed her food. I don't know what you mean, Gunny. Previous assignment doing communications support. That's what you said. But there's no communications training in your file. No certifications, no schools. My file is incomplete. Your file is suspicious. Webb set down his pizza. I'm going to find out what you're hiding. I've got friends at Bupers. I'll make some calls. Do what you need to do, Gunny. Oh, I will. Because I don't tolerate liars in my office. If you're hiding something, if you're here under false pretenses, I'll make sure you're gone. Dishonorably, if possible. Monroe turned to face him fully. With respect, Gunny, I completed the mission. A sailor's life might have been saved because of it. Maybe that's more important than whatever personal problem you have with me. Webb's face darkened. Personal problem? You think this is personal? I think you don't like being reminded that competence doesn't always come with the right packaging. It was the wrong thing to say. Monroe knew it the moment the words left her mouth. Webb's expression shifted from anger to something colder, more calculated. You're right, he said quietly. Competence matters, but so does trust, and I don't trust you. Which means I'm going to be watching everything you do, every form you file, every minute you're in my office. And when you fuck up, because people who hide things always fuck up eventually, I'll be there to document it. He walked away. Monroe turned back to the terminal, her hands trembling again, not from fear, from rage, at herself for engaging, for letting him see that his words landed, for breaking the cardinal rule of survival. Don't give them ammunition. The storm raged outside. Inside, Monroe watched numbers scroll across a screen and tried not to think about how many ways her carefully constructed invisibility was unraveling. By 2,000 hours, the worst of the storm had passed. The rain continued, but the wind had dropped to manageable levels. Power was being restored, building by building. The comm center began to empty as personnel returned to their normal duties. Monroe stayed at the terminal. No one had told her she could leave, and she wasn't sure where she'd go anyway. Back to the office? Back to the barracks where Hayworth and Rodriguez would have 100 questions. Bradley appeared beside her. You can head out, Staff Sergeant. We've got night watch taking over. Yes, sir. Monroe stood, her back protesting the hours of sitting. Before you go, Bradley gestured to his office, a small room off the main comm center. Quick debrief. The office was barely large enough for a desk and 2 chairs. Bradley closed the door, cutting off the ambient noise. The silence was oppressive. Sit, Bradley said. Monroe sat. That was good work today. Really good work. The kind of work that makes me wonder why someone with your skills is doing administrative filing. Monroe kept her face neutral. I go where I'm assigned, sir. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give. Bradley leaned back in his chair. Let me tell you what I see. I see a sailor with massive gaps in her personnel file. I see someone who supposedly has no specialized training but just troubleshot a satellite uplink like she'd been doing it for years. I see someone who holds herself like she's been in situations a lot worse than a storm. He paused. I see someone who's hiding something significant. Monroe said nothing. I'm not asking you to tell me what it is. I'm telling you that whatever it is, it's going to come out eventually. And when it does, you want it to come out on your terms, not someone else's. With respect, sir, I've told you everything I'm authorized to tell you. Authorized. Bradley smiled without humor. That's an interesting word choice, which implies there are things you're not authorized to share. Every sailor has information they can't share, sir. Operational security, classified procedures. Don't insult my intelligence, Monroe. This isn't about standard OPSEC. Bradley leaned forward. I spent 6 years at NAVSOC. I know what a black file looks like. I know what it means when someone's records are full of holes and marked with classification codes that redirect to classified directories. I've seen this before. Monroe's pulse quickened. NAVSOC. Naval Special Operations Command. If Bradley had worked there, he had context most people didn't. He could make educated guesses about the gaps in her file. I don't know what you think you see. I think I see someone who did something important enough to be classified, and something went wrong. Bradley's voice softened. I think I see someone who got hurt, physically or psychologically or both, and is now paying the price while the system figures out what to do with her. The accuracy of his assessment was frightening. Monroe forced her breathing to stay even. That's a lot of speculation, sir. It's not speculation when I've seen it happen to other people. The question is, are you getting the support you need, or are you just being warehoused until someone decides you're too much trouble? Monroe met his eyes. I'm managing. Managing isn't surviving, and surviving isn't living. Bradley stood, walked to the window. Rain streaked the glass. Look, I can't force you to tell me anything, but I can make your life here easier or harder. Right now, Gunny Webb thinks you're a problem. He's going to treat you like one. I can run interference, but only if you give me something to work with. What do you want me to say? The truth would be nice. Monroe stood. The truth is I'm a staff sergeant doing administrative duty at Naval Station Kitsap Bangor. The truth is I fixed a satellite uplink today because someone needed to and I had the skills. The truth is everything else is above your clearance level, sir. With respect, it was a gamble. Invoking clearance levels was basically confirming Bradley's suspicions, but it also shut down the conversation legally. He couldn't press for classified information without proper authorization. Bradley turned from the window. Fair enough, but Monroe, when this blows up, and it will blow up, you're going to need allies. Remember that. Yes, sir. She left the office, walked through the comm center, descended the stairs. Outside, the rain had stopped. The base looked washed clean, puddles reflecting streetlights like broken mirrors. Monroe walked slowly back to the office building, her mind churning. When this blows up. Not if. When. Bradley saw it coming. The cryptic texts saw it coming. Hell, even Monroe saw it coming. The question was whether she could control the explosion or whether it would consume her. She reached Building 2471. The lights were back on. Emergency protocols ended. She took the stairs to the third floor, entered the office. Empty now, except for the night watch. A young seaman who looked barely 18, reading something on his phone. Hey, the seaman said. You're transfer, right? Heard you were pretty badass today. Monroe almost smiled. Transfer. Even after what happened, she was still just transfer. Just did my job. Well, people are talking about it. You're like, famous now. The woman who saved Nevada's sailor. Famous. The word settled in Monroe's chest like lead. Famous was the opposite of invisible. Famous meant people paid attention. Famous meant questions. I didn't save anyone, Monroe said. I fixed a satellite. Yeah, but if you hadn't, that sailor might have died. That's pretty heroic. Heroic. Another word that didn't fit. Heroes were people like Doc and Vega, who died keeping promises. Monroe was just someone who'd survived long enough to feel guilty about it. She grabbed her personal effects from her desk. Phone, keys, a protein bar she'd forgotten to eat. The seaman watched her with that expression people got when they thought you were interesting. Monroe hated it. Good night, she said. Yeah, hey, transfer. Thanks for what you did, even if you don't think it's a big deal. Monroe left without responding, walked down the stairs, out into the night. The air smelled like rain and salt water. Her uniform was still damp from earlier, clinging uncomfortably to her skin. She should go back to the barracks. Should shower, change, try to sleep. Instead, she found herself walking toward the water. The submarine piers were restricted access, but the public waterfront area offered a view of the bay. Monroe sat on a concrete barrier, staring at the dark water. Her phone buzzed. Sarah Chen saw the base reports. You're trending on internal Navy social media. Mystery sailor saves the day. Want to tell me what happened? Monroe typed, fixed a satellite. It's not a big deal. Chen, everything you do becomes a big deal. You know that, right? You can't just exist quietly. It's not in your nature. Monroe, I'm trying. Chen, try harder. Or stop trying and accept that you're never going to be normal. Monroe stared at the message. Accept that you're never going to be normal. Easy for Chen to say. She had a medical discharge, a disability rating, a clear path forward. Monroe had, what? A thin file, a fake assignment, and a collection of skills she wasn't supposed to have. She deleted the conversation, opened her photos instead, dozens of images she'd been meaning to delete but couldn't. Pictures from before. Her team in Afghanistan, posing with captured weapons and forced smiles. Doc throwing up a peace sign, always the optimist. Vega looking serious, professional, like he was born in uniform. Both dead now, because she'd made a choice. The right choice, mathematically. 47 saved, 2 lost. Any commander would call that a win. But Doc and Vega didn't feel like acceptable losses. Monroe closed her photos, put her phone away, sat in the dark and listened to the water lap against concrete. Somewhere out there, submarines moved silently through the depths, carrying enough firepower to end the world. People operated complex machines with precision and trust, knowing that one mistake could kill everyone. And here she was, counting tiles and filing forms, pretending she'd never been part of that world. The absurdity would have been funny if it wasn't so crushing. At 2200, Monroe finally returned to the barracks. The lights were off, her roommates presumably asleep. She navigated in the dark, muscle memory guiding her to her bunk, changed out of her damp uniform, climbed into bed. Sleep didn't come. It rarely did. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster. 47. Always 47. The math never changed. Friday morning arrived with weak sunlight and institutional indifference. Monroe dressed, went to PT formation, ran her slow miles, showered, reported to the office. Everything normal except for the way people looked at her now. Curious, speculative, like she'd become interesting overnight. Webb was already at his desk when she arrived. He didn't acknowledge her entrance, but the tension in his shoulders telegraphed his awareness. Monroe sat at her desk, powered on her computer, prepared for another day of forms and silent hostility. At 08:30, Bradley appeared in the doorway. "Staff Sergeant Monroe, a moment please." Monroe followed him to his office. 2 people were waiting inside, a Navy commander she didn't recognize, and a civilian woman with a laminated badge that read Defense Security Service. "Staff Sergeant Monroe," the commander said. "I'm Commander Patterson, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. This is Special Agent Reeves, DSS. We need to ask you some questions about your service record." Monroe's pulse quickened. "Yes, sir. Specifically, we need to verify your qualifications for handling classified communications equipment." Yesterday's incident raised some flags. Patterson opened a folder. "Your official record lists no technical certifications, no specialized training, no qualifications that would explain your ability to troubleshoot a satellite uplink system." "I had informal training, sir, on the job." "Where? Previous assignments? Can you be more specific?" Monroe glanced at Agent Reeves. The woman's expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes were sharp. This wasn't a random inquiry. Someone had flagged Monroe's file, probably triggered an automatic review when she accessed the satellite system. "With respect, sir, some of my previous assignments are classified. I'm not authorized to discuss specifics without proper clearance verification," Patterson finished. "Yes, we're aware, which is part of the problem. Your file has more classification markers than actual information. It's raised concerns about whether you're authorized to be here at all. I was assigned here through proper channels. Were you? Or were you tucked away because someone didn't know what else to do with you?" Patterson leaned forward. "Staff Sergeant, we're not trying to jam you up. But when someone with a file like yours suddenly demonstrates capabilities they're not supposed to have, we have to investigate. It's procedure." Agent Reeves spoke for the first time. "We've contacted your previous command. Or rather, we've tried to. Every inquiry gets redirected to classified offices, which suggests your previous work involved special operations or intelligence activities that are still protected." Monroe said nothing. "Here's what's going to happen," Patterson continued. "We're going to temporarily suspend your access to any sensitive systems while we verify your clearances and qualifications. You'll continue administrative duties, but no hands-on work with anything above basic computer systems. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Good. We'll be in touch when we have more information. In the meantime, Gunnery Sergeant Webb has been briefed. He'll make sure you stay within your authorized scope." The meeting ended. Monroe walked back to the office, feeling every eye on her. Webb was waiting at her desk, arms crossed. "My office, now." Monroe followed him to the small office off the main room. Webb closed the door with exaggerated care. "So, NCIS? That's impressive. Most people go their whole careers without getting investigated." "I'm not being investigated. They're investigating whether you belong here, whether you lied on your application, whether you're some kind of security risk." Webb sat on the edge of his desk. "I knew something was off about you. I knew it from day one." Monroe kept her voice level. "I haven't lied about anything." "No? Then explain to me how someone with zero technical certifications fixes a satellite uplink like it's changing a light bulb. Explain how you hold yourself like someone who's seen combat but your file says you've never deployed. Explain why every question about your background gets deflected with classified this and above your clearance that. I can't explain those things because they're not relevant to my current assignment. Not relevant. You made me look like an idiot in front of Commander Bradley and half the comm center. You think that's not relevant? There it was. The real grievance. Not that Monroe had overstepped, that she'd made Webb look incompetent by comparison. That wasn't my intention, Gunny. I don't care about your intentions. I care that you're a liability, and starting now, you're going to be the most scrutinized sailor in this command. Every form you file, every minute you spend on the clock, I'm going to be watching. And when you screw up, not if, when, I'm going to document everything and make sure you're gone for good. Is that all, Gunny? Webb's jaw tightened. You know what your problem is, Transfer. You think you're special. You think whatever secret shit you did before makes you better than everyone else. But you're here now, in my office, doing my work. And here you're nobody. Monroe met his eyes. I never said I was anybody. Then start acting like it. Dismissed. She left the office. Returned to her desk. Hayworth and Rodriguez were whispering, stealing glances. Chen looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Monroe powered on her computer and opened her email. 73 new messages, most of them routine distribution lists. One email stood out. Sender. Redacted. Subject. Check your personal device. Monroe's hands went cold. She pulled out her personal phone, found a new message from the mystery number. They're going to dig into your file. Can't let that happen. Trust me, you need to disappear before they find what they're looking for. Disappear. Like it was that simple. Like she could just walk away from a military installation in the middle of an investigation. Monroe deleted the message, tried to focus on work, but her mind was racing, running scenarios, calculating probabilities. NCIS was thorough. If they started pulling threads, they'd eventually reach classified operations. And once they reached those operations, they'd find the incident reports, the after-action reviews, the medical assessments. They'd find 47 lives saved and 2 lives lost. They'd find the reason Monroe couldn't sleep, couldn't write straight, couldn't exist in normal military spaces anymore. They'd find the explosion that had turned her brain into Swiss cheese. And once they found it, there'd be questions. Questions she couldn't answer without revealing operations that were still classified. Questions that would force her to relive the worst day of her life in front of investigators who saw her as a puzzle to solve, not a person trying to survive. Monroe closed her email, picked up a stack of supply requests, started processing them with mechanical precision. Her head was pounding again, that feeling like someone had stuffed her skull with broken glass. Hayworth approached. So, NCIS. That's pretty serious. Monroe didn't look up. It's routine. Routine doesn't usually involve security clearance investigations. I looked it up. They only do that when they think someone's a threat. I'm not a threat. Then what are you? Hayworth leaned against the desk. Because you're sure as hell not just an admin transfer. Nobody with your skills ends up filing paperwork unless something went really wrong. Monroe set down her pen. Why do you care? Because I don't like mysteries. And you're one giant mystery wrapped in a bullshit file. Then stop trying to solve me and focus on your own work. Hayworth straightened. You know, I almost felt sorry for you before. The whole pathetic transfer thing. But now I'm thinking you're exactly where you deserve to be. She walked away. Monroe returned to the forms. Her handwriting was worse today, letters tilting at angles that made no geometric sense. She crossed out mistakes, started over, crossed out more mistakes, started over again. By lunch, she'd completed 3 forms that should have taken 15 minutes. At 1300, Bradley stopped by her desk. How are you holding up? Fine, sir. You don't look fine. You look like you haven't slept in a week. I'm managing. Bradley glanced around the office. Webb in his private office, Hayworth and Rodriguez at lunch, Chen pretending not to listen. Walk with me. They left the building, walked toward the waterfront. The day was clear, unusual for Kitsap in November. Sunlight sparkled on the water like false promises. NCIS is going to take time, Bradley said. Weeks, maybe months. They'll chase your file through channels until they hit classification walls. Then they'll circle back and try to find someone who'll talk off the record. I know how investigations work, sir. Then you know you need to start thinking about your endgame. What happens when they can't verify your story because your story is classified? What happens when Webb decides he has enough ambiguous evidence to recommend your discharge? Monroe stopped walking. Are you asking me to resign? I'm asking if you've thought about what you want. Not what the Navy wants, not what your old command wants. What you want. I want to serve. Do you? Or do you want to hide? Bradley turned to face her. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're using this assignment as camouflage. You're competent enough to be useful, but damaged enough that nobody expects excellence. You're visible enough to not disappear, but invisible enough to not matter. The words landed like physical blows. Monroe forced her breathing to stay even. I'm doing the job I was assigned. You're doing the bare minimum of a job you're overqualified for while hoping nobody notices you're overqualified. That's not serving. That's surviving. Maybe surviving is all I have right now. Bradley's expression softened. I get it. I really do. But eventually, someone's going to force the issue. And when that happens, you better have a plan better than hope they forget about me. They walked back to the office in silence. Monroe's phone buzzed 3 times during the walk. Each buzz another message from the mystery number. She didn't check them. Didn't want to know what warnings were being sent. The afternoon crawled past. Monroe processed forms, avoided eye contact, counted the minutes until she could escape. At 1700, Webb called her into his office again. Tomorrow's Saturday, he said. You're on duty watch. Gunny, the duty roster doesn't have me scheduled until next week. It does now. Chen's got a conflict. You're covering. Chen didn't have a conflict. This was punishment, transparent and petty. But Monroe had no leverage to argue. Yes, Gunny. So 600 to 1800. Don't be late. Monroe left the office, grabbed her cover, walked out into the evening. Her phone was buzzing constantly now, messages piling up from the mystery number. She finally checked them in her car. They're accelerating the investigation. Someone high up is pushing for answers. Your old team is being questioned. They're trying to piece together what happened. You need to make a choice. Stay and risk exposure or disappear before they connect the dots. There's a third option, but you need to trust me. Monroe deleted all the messages, turned off her phone, sat in the parking lot watching sailors stream out of buildings, heading to whatever their lives were when they took off the uniform. She thought about Bradley's question, "What do you want?" The honest answer was, she didn't know anymore. Once she'd wanted to serve, to be part of something bigger, to use her skills in ways that mattered. Once she'd been good at her job, great at it actually, the kind of operator people requested by name. But that was before Kandahar, before the explosion, before 47 saved and 2 lost became the only math that mattered. Now she just wanted to exist without hurting, to make it through a day without her brain short-circuiting, to file forms and be nobody and never have to make another decision that ended with people dying. Was that so much to ask? Her phone buzzed again, powered on automatically, because of course it did. One more message. Storm's not over, Monroe. The real one hasn't even started. Tomorrow, 0600, be ready for anything. She stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then she started the car and drove back to the barracks, where Hayworth and Rodriguez would whisper about her, and Chen would avoid her eyes, and the ceiling would have 47 tiles she'd count until dawn. The math never changed, but maybe finally the variables were about to. Saturday morning came with fog so thick Monroe could barely see across the parking lot. She dressed in the dark, 0530, 30 minutes before her duty watch started, and walked through gray nothing to building 2471. The base was quiet at this hour, just the security patrols and the distant hum of the submarine facilities running on skeleton crews. The office was empty when she arrived. Monroe unlocked the door, turned on the lights, started the coffee maker that everyone complained about but nobody replaced. Standard duty watch protocols, monitor phones, respond to emails, handle any emergencies that came up during the weekend. She sat at the duty desk and opened the logbook. The previous watch, a young ensign named Morrison, had written in neat block letters, "Uneventful shift, no incidents." Monroe dated a new page, wrote, 600, watch begins. Weather, heavy fog. Her phone buzzed, not her personal phone, the duty phone issued to whoever pulled watch. Monroe answered, "Staff duty, Staff Sergeant Monroe speaking. This is operations. We've got an inbound supply flight from JBLM requesting emergency landing clearance. Their primary airfield is IFR 00 conditions, and they're low on fuel. Can you coordinate with Tower and confirm we can accommodate?" Monroe's mind shifted into gear. JBLM, Joint Base Lewis McChord, 40 miles south. IFR 00 meant instrument flight rules with zero visibility, the worst possible conditions for landing. If they were requesting emergency clearance, it meant they couldn't make it anywhere else. What's the aircraft type? C-130J Super Hercules, carrying critical medical supplies for Naval Hospital Bremerton. They've got maybe 20 minutes of fuel. 20 minutes. Monroe pulled up the base operations frequency on the duty computer. I'll coordinate. Stand by. She dialed the tower. The conversation was technical, rapid fire, questions about runway conditions, approach vectors, emergency equipment status. Monroe's brain processed the information with ease, muscle memory from 100 similar situations kicking in. Within 3 minutes, she'd coordinated clearance for the emergency landing. The C-130 would approach from the south, use ILS, Instrument Landing System, to guide them through the fog and touch down on runway 07, which had the longest overrun in case of problems. Tower confirms ready, Monroe told operations. Bird is cleared for emergency approach. Copy that. Thanks, staff duty. Monroe hung up, logged the incident. 0615. Coordinated emergency landing clearance for C-130 from JBLM. Aircraft inbound ETA 0630. She should have felt proud. Instead, she felt exposed. Again. This was supposed to be a quiet watch. Answer phones, file incident reports, stay invisible. Now she'd just coordinated an emergency aircraft landing like it was routine. Because for her, once upon a time, it had been routine. At 0628, the building's emergency lights flickered on. A voice over the loudspeaker. Emergency aircraft landing in progress. All personnel maintain awareness of runway 07. Monroe walked to the window. Through the fog, she could just make out the landing lights of the C-130 materializing like ghosts. The aircraft descended smoothly, touched down with barely a bounce, deployed its thrust reversers with a roar that rattled the windows. Safe. Monroe returned to the duty desk. Logged. 0630, emergency aircraft landed successfully. No injuries. Medical supplies being transferred. Her phone rang again. Operations. Nice work on the coordination. You made that look easy. Just following procedures. Right. Well, Commander Bradley wanted me to let you know he's impressed. Said to tell you good job. Monroe hung up feeling sick. Impressed. Every time someone was impressed, it meant she'd revealed another layer of competence she was supposed to keep buried. At 0700, Webb walked through the door. He wasn't scheduled to be here. It was Saturday, his day off. But there he was, uniform perfect, expression dark. I got a call, he said without preamble. About an emergency aircraft landing that you coordinated. Monroe stood. Yes, Gunny, C-130 from JBLM, low fuel IFR. I know what happened. What I want to know is how you knew how to handle it. Because coordinating emergency aircraft operations isn't in your job description. It was straightforward. I called the tower, relayed information. You spoke their language. You knew exactly what questions to ask, exactly what information they needed. That's not straightforward. That's specialized knowledge. Webb moved closer. Who are you, really? Monroe kept her voice level. I'm Staff Sergeant Monroe, assigned to... Cut the shit. I've been doing some checking. Called in favors, talked to people who know people. You know what I found? He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something. Your name pops up in casualty reports from Afghanistan. Not as a casualty, as someone involved in a classified incident. The details are redacted, but the dates match up with a gap in your file. Monroe's pulse quickened. I can't comment on classified. You were in combat. Real combat, not admin duty. And something happened. Something bad enough that they had to hide it. Webb's eyes were sharp, almost gleeful. You're broken goods, aren't you? They sent you here because they don't know what else to do with you. Gunny, don't deny it. I can see it in your eyes. You've got that look, the one soldiers get when they've seen things they can't unsee. My uncle had it after Vietnam. My dad had it after Desert Storm. And you've got it. He paused. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me the truth about what you did and what happened to you. Or I'm going to recommend your immediate discharge for fraudulent enlistment. I haven't lied about... You've lied by omission. Every day you show up here pretending to be some incompetent transfer, you're lying. And I'm done enabling it. The door opened. Commander Bradley walked in, followed by two people Monroe didn't recognize, a Navy captain and a civilian woman in an expensive suit. Gunnery Sergeant Webb, Bradley said. Step away from Staff Sergeant Monroe, please. Webb's expression flickered. Confusion, then anger. Sir, I'm conducting. You're conducting nothing. This situation is above your authority. Bradley gestured to the captain. This is Captain Zhao from Naval Personnel Command, and this is Ms. Winters from the Office of the Secretary of Defense. The woman named Winters smiled coldly. Staff Sergeant Monroe, we need to have a conversation, in private. Monroe's world tilted. OSD, Office of the Secretary of Defense. That was civilian oversight at the highest levels. Whatever was happening, it wasn't a routine investigation anymore. Yes, ma'am. Conference room, now. Monroe followed them. Webb started to protest, but Bradley cut him off with a look. The conference room door closed, sealing out the rest of the office. 4 people sat facing Monroe. Captain Zhao, Ms. Winters, Bradley, and one more person who'd been waiting inside. A man in his 50s with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that had seen things. Monroe knew those eyes, knew that posture, knew before he spoke exactly what he was. Staff Sergeant Monroe, the man said. I'm Rear Admiral James Cartwright, JSOC liaison, and we need to talk about Kandahar. The room went very quiet. Monroe sat very still. Kandahar, the word she'd avoided saying for 2 years, the place where everything had shattered. Sir, before you say you can't talk about it, let me be clear. I have the clearances. I know what happened. I know about Operation Phantom Cord. I know about the decision you made. Cartwright leaned forward. What I need to know is, who told Gunnery Sergeant Webb to start digging into your file? Monroe blinked. I don't understand, sir. Webb doesn't have the clearance or the connections to access classified casualty reports. Someone fed him information. Someone wanted him to push you, to create a situation. Cartwright's eyes were steel. Someone's been sending you messages, haven't they? Anonymous, cryptic, warning you about investigations and storms. Monroe's blood went cold. How do you know about? Because I've been tracking the same person. Someone inside the intelligence community has been manipulating your situation, setting up dominoes, pushing you toward something. I don't know what yet. But this emergency landing this morning, that wasn't random. The fog conditions were forecasted 3 days ago. Someone made sure that C-130 got rerouted to Kitsap specifically when you were on duty. Why would someone? To force you to demonstrate competence. To create a paper trail of incidents showing you have capabilities you're not supposed to have. Winters spoke now, her voice precise. Someone is building a case against you, or building a case for something involving you. Either way, you're being used. Monroe's head was pounding. I don't understand. Who would do this? Cartwright exchanged glances with Winters. We have suspicions, but suspicions aren't evidence. What we need is for you to tell us everything, starting with Kandahar. Monroe closed her eyes, opened them. I can't. It's still classified. I'm declassifying it, right now, in this room. Cartwright pulled out a document. By authority granted to me as JSOC liaison and with coordination from OSD, Operation Phantom Cord is declassified for purposes of this investigation. You're authorized to speak freely. The words Monroe had been holding for 2 years suddenly had permission to exist, but she didn't know where to start. Cartwright seemed to sense this. Start with your name, your real name. Monroe took a breath. My name is Leah Monroe, not Staff Sergeant, not anymore. Her voice cracked. I was Commander, 05, Naval Intelligence. The room was silent. Bradley's eyes widened. Captain Zhao leaned back, processing. Winters just nodded, like she'd already known. Commander, Cartwright said gently, tell us about Kandahar. And Monroe. Commander. Monroe. Finally, let the story out. August 6, 2011, province of Wardak, Afghanistan. Monroe's voice was flat, reciting facts like a mission report, the only way she could tell it without breaking. I was assigned to ISA, Intelligence Support Activity. Officially, I was running human operations. Unofficially, I was the liaison between Special Operations Units and intelligence gathering. My call sign was Phantom. She paused, testing the word. Phantom. She hadn't said it aloud in 2 years. On August 5th, we received intelligence that a high-value target, a Taliban commander with information about an imminent attack on ISAF forces, was hiding in a compound 30 clicks north of Kabul. The timing was critical. We'd lost 30 service members the day before when Extortion 17 went down. Morale was shattered. Command wanted a win. Cartwright nodded. I remember. The whole community was reeling. We assembled a joint task force, 6 DevGru operators, 4 Delta, and 2 ISA. Me and my intelligence specialist, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen. The mission was simple: extract the HVT and his family before Taliban reprisals killed them. Monroe's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat on the table. We inserted via MH47 at 0200. Compound was supposed to be lightly defended. Intelligence said maybe 3 hostiles. We breached at 0217. Found the HVT, his wife, 5 children. But we also found something else. She closed her eyes, seeing it again. IEDs. The compound was wired, not just one, a whole network, redundant systems, backup triggers. Whoever set them expected us. Your team had an EOD specialist? Winters asked. We had Doc, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Donovan. Best EOD tech I ever worked with. Monroe's voice tightened. But even he said the setup was sophisticated, Chechnyan design, modified. He could defuse them, but it would take time we didn't have. Taliban reinforcements were 7 minutes out. So what did you do? Cartwright's voice was gentle. I did the math. We had 12 minutes to extract 7 civilians and 12 operators. If Doc tried to defuse every IED, we wouldn't make it out. If we left them armed, the entire compound would collapse when we exfiltrated, killing the civilians and potentially us. Monroe opened her eyes. I gave Doc 2 options: controlled detonation from distance or attempt field disarmament. He chose disarmament. Said he could do it in 8 minutes. Could he? Zhao asked. Yes. He got the primary network down in 7 minutes, 40 seconds. But there was a secondary system we hadn't detected. When he cut the last wire, it triggered a failsafe. Monroe's voice dropped to barely a whisper. The blast. It was supposed to be contained, but the walls were weaker than we thought. The explosion brought down half the compound. Silence in the room. Monroe continued, mechanical now. Doc died instantly. So did Vega. Staff Sergeant Hector Vega, Delta. He'd been providing cover, got caught in the collapse. The rest of us, we got out. 47 souls extracted. 7 HVT family, 40 personnel. We'd called in a QRF that was staged nearby. If that compound had fully collapsed, all of them would have died. But Doc and Vega didn't make it, Winters said. No. Monroe's hands were fists now. They didn't make it because I made the call. I chose speed over safety. I chose 47 lives over 2, and the math was right. But the math doesn't bring them back. Cartwright leaned forward. Commander, what you did was the correct tactical decision. Any officer in that situation would have made the same call. Would they? Monroe looked at him. Because I've been over it 10,000 times. If I'd given Doc 1 more minute, if I'd pulled him back earlier, you'd be sitting here with 47 dead and only 2 alive, asking yourself why you didn't make the other choice. Cartwright's voice was firm. Survivor's guilt is real, but it doesn't change the fact that you saved lives that night. Monroe said nothing. The guilt lived in her chest like a physical weight, and no amount of logic made it lighter. What happened after the operation? Bradley asked. Debriefing at Bagram, then medical eval at Landstuhl. That's where they found the TBI. Monroe touched her temple. I was 300 meters from the blast, but the pressure wave was enough. Diffuse axonal injury. Traumatic brain injury. My brain basically bounced around inside my skull like a pinball. And they sent you to Walter Reed, Winters said, for 6 months. Physical therapy, cognitive therapy, neuropsych evaluations. The doc said I'd never be fully operational again. Memory issues, executive function deficits, chronic headaches. I couldn't pass the medical clearance for intelligence work. So they gave you a medical discharge. They tried, but my file was too classified. Too many operations that were still active. Too many connections to ongoing missions. They couldn't just release me into civilian life with everything I knew. Monroe's laugh was bitter. So they put me in administrative limbo. Medical separation pending. Temporary duty at Kitsap. Desk work until someone figures out what to do with a broken commander who knows too much. The room absorbed this. Finally, Cartwright spoke. And someone decided to use your situation. What do you mean? This whole thing. Webb's harassment, the emergency landing, the anonymous messages. It's too coordinated to be random. Someone knows your background. Someone knows you're stuck between discharge and active duty. And someone is pushing you to either break or demonstrate that you're still capable. But why? Winters answered. Because there's a job coming. Something that needs someone with your specific skill set and your specific vulnerabilities. Someone who can be pressured into accepting a mission they shouldn't accept. Monroe felt ice in her veins. What kind of job? We don't know yet. But whoever's pulling strings has resources and access. They've manipulated your assignment, fed information to Webb, Possibly even arrange the emergency landing this morning. Cartwright pulled out his phone, showed Monroe a series of text messages. These look familiar? They were identical to the ones Monroe had received. Same cryptic warnings, same anonymous sender. You got them too? Monroe asked. No, but we traced the number. It's a burner phone registered to a shell company that doesn't exist. The texts are sent via encrypted relay servers. Whoever's behind this is very good at staying hidden. So what happens now? Now, Winters said, we make a decision. We can pull you out of Kitsap immediately, put you in protective custody while we investigate, or we use you as bait. Cartwright finished. We let you stay here, continue your assignment, and see who makes contact. See what they want. Monroe looked between them. You want me to be bait? I want you to make an informed choice, Cartwright said. You can walk away right now. Medical discharge, full benefits done, or you can help us find whoever's doing this. Your call. Monroe thought about Doc, about Vega, about 47 lives saved and 2 lost, about spending the last 2 years counting ceiling tiles and pretending to be nobody. If I stay, what happens to my cover? Webb knows something's wrong. He'll keep pushing. Webb will be reassigned, Zhao said. Effective Monday. I'll personally ensure he's transferred somewhere he can't cause problems. And the investigation? NCIS. Closed. Explained away as administrative error. Winters smiled coldly. We're very good at making problems disappear when we need to. Monroe sat back. The headache was a living thing now, claws digging into her skull. But beneath the pain, something else was stirring. Not hope exactly, but possibility. If I stay, she said slowly, I want conditions. Such as, no more hiding. I'm tired of pretending to be incompetent. If someone's testing me, let them see what they're testing. Cartwright smiled. Done. What else? I want Sarah Chen brought in. She knows my situation, knows the operation. If this goes sideways, I want someone I trust. We can arrange that. And I want protection for the people in this office. Hayworth, Rodriguez, Chen. If this is as dangerous as you think, I don't want civilians caught in the crossfire. Noted. Winters made a note on her tablet. Anything else? Monroe thought about the last 2 years, about counting tiles and filing forms and slowly dying inside while pretending to be alive. I want my rank back. Not officially, not publicly, but in this room, with you people. I want to stop being Staff Sergeant Nobody and remember what it felt like to be Commander Monroe. Cartwright stood, extended his hand. Welcome back, Commander. Monroe shook his hand, and for the first time in 2 years, she felt almost human. The meeting ended at 09:30. Monroe walked out of the conference room to find the entire office staring at her. Webb was at his desk, face red with barely controlled rage. Hayworth and Rodriguez looked confused. Chen just looked worried. Bradley cleared his throat. Attention in the office. Everyone stood. Monroe felt their eyes on her, questioning, judging. Effective immediately, Bradley continued. Gunnery Sergeant Webb is being reassigned to Naval Station Norfolk. He'll be departing Monday morning. Until then, Commander Monroe will be acting office supervisor. The silence was deafening. Webb's mouth fell open. Hayworth looked like she'd been slapped. Commander? Webb finally managed. Monroe met his eyes. Yes, Gunny. Commander. 05, Naval Intelligence. And for the record, everything you've said to me for the past 2 weeks constitutes insubordination and conduct unbecoming. You're lucky they're just transferring you. Webb stood so fast his chair fell over. This is bullshit. You can't just... Gunnery Sergeant... Captain Zhao's voice cut through the room like a blade. He'd followed Monroe out. You will stand down, collect your personal effects, and report to the base commander's office at 1400 for out-processing. Is that clear? Webb's hands were shaking. Yes, sir. Good. Dismissed. Webb grabbed his cover, walked to the door. He paused, looked back at Monroe. You might have fooled them, but I know what you are. You're broken, and broken things don't get fixed. They just break everyone around them. He left. The door slammed behind him. Monroe stood in the center of the office, feeling every eye on her. Finally, Hayworth spoke. Commander? You're a commander? And we've been treating me like shit? Monroe finished. Yeah, you have been. But your file? My file is classified, was classified. Now it's declassified enough for you to know that I outrank everyone in this room except Captain Zhao. Monroe walked to Webb's, now her desk, sat down. Here's what's going to happen. You're all going to go back to work. You're going to pretend the last 2 weeks didn't happen, and you're going to start treating me with the respect my rank demands. Questions? Silence. Good. Rodriguez, get me a coffee. Chen, pull the personnel files for everyone in this office. Hayworth. Monroe paused, watching the younger woman squirm. Hayworth, you're going to sit at your desk and think very carefully about every shitty thing you've said to a superior officer. When you're done thinking, you'll write me a memo explaining why I shouldn't have you court-martialed. Hayworth's face went white. Ma'am, I didn't know. That's not an excuse. Dismissed. They scattered to their desks. Monroe sat in the heavy silence, feeling the weight of command settle back on her shoulders. It felt foreign and familiar at once, like putting on a uniform after years of civilian clothes. Her phone buzzed. The mystery number. Well played, Commander. Let's see if you're ready for what comes next. Monroe deleted the message, looked at the computer screen, the stacks of paperwork, the office full of people who'd just learned their nobody transfer was actually somebody. 47 lives saved, 2 lives lost. Maybe it was time to stop counting the losses and start counting what she could still do. The math was about to change. The rest of Saturday passed in surreal quiet. Rodriguez brought coffee. Good coffee from somewhere off base, not the battery acid from the office pot. Chen delivered the personnel files without meeting Monroe's eyes. Hayworth wrote her memo, tears streaming down her face. Monroe read the memo at 1600. It was 3 pages of apologies, excuses, and what seemed like genuine remorse. She set it aside, called Hayworth into the office. Sit. Hayworth sat, looking like she expected execution. I'm not going to court-martial you, Monroe said. But I am going to tell you something. You treated me like dirt because you thought you could, because I looked weak and broken and easy to hurt. And you were right, I am broken. But broken doesn't mean powerless, and it sure as hell doesn't mean you get to use someone as your punching bag. I'm sorry, ma'am. Sorry isn't enough, but it's a start. Monroe leaned forward. You're young. You're probably going to have a decent career if you don't screw it up. So learn from this. Never assume you know someone's story. Never assume weakness is permission to be cruel. Got it? Yes, ma'am. Good. Dismissed. Hayworth left. Monroe returned to the paperwork on her desk. Actual work now, not busy work. Budget reviews, personnel evaluations, operational reports, things that mattered. At 1800, her duty watch ended. Monroe logged the final entry. No further incidents. Watch secured. She walked out into the evening. The fog had lifted, revealing stars, thousands of them, sharp and cold. Monroe stood in the parking lot looking up. Somewhere out there, someone was pulling strings, using her, testing her, preparing her for something she didn't yet understand. But for the first time in 2 years, Monroe felt ready to fight back. Her phone buzzed one more time. Tomorrow, 0800, Building 2477. Come alone. It's time you learned the truth. Monroe stared at the message. Then she forwarded it to Cartwright with a note. Looks like our rabbit is coming out of hiding. His response was immediate. We'll be watching. But Monroe, be careful. Whoever this is, they've been planning this for a long time. Monroe pocketed her phone, walked to her car, drove back to the barracks where her roommates, former roommates, she'd be moving to officer quarters Monday, would avoid her like she'd become radioactive. That night, she didn't count ceiling tiles. She planned. She strategized. She remembered what it felt like to be an operator instead of a victim. And for the first time in 2 years, she slept without nightmares. The math was changing. And tomorrow, she'd finally learn why. Sunday morning, 0745. Monroe stood outside Building 2477, dressed in a fresh uniform, the right uniform now, with Commander's oak leaves on the collar instead of Staff Sergeant stripes. The insignia felt heavier than she remembered. The building was quiet. Most of the base was still sleeping off Saturday night liberty. Monroe had spent the pre-dawn hours running, real running this time, not the shuffling jog of the past 2 weeks. Her body remembered the pace, even if her lungs protested. She checked her phone. No new messages from the mystery number, but she knew they were watching, could feel it like pressure against her skin. At 0757, she entered the building, took the stairs to the 3rd floor. The comm center doors were closed but unlocked. Monroe pushed through into darkness. Lights, she said. They flickered on. The room was empty except for one person sitting at the main communication terminal. A woman, maybe 40, with short dark hair and a face Monroe recognized from classified briefings, but couldn't place. Commander Monroe, the woman said. Thank you for coming. Monroe's hand drifted toward her sidearm, except she wasn't armed, hadn't been issued a weapon since arriving at Kitsap. Old habits dying hard. "You've been sending me messages," Monroe said. "I have." The woman stood, hands visible, non-threatening. "My name is Dr. Elizabeth Reeves. I'm a civilian contractor with DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and I've been watching you for a very long time." Monroe's mind raced. DARPA, Defense Research, Advanced Projects. Why? Because 2 years ago you were involved in an incident that should have killed you. The blast that caused your TBI, the pressure wave, the neurological damage, should have been fatal, but it wasn't, and we want to know why. Monroe's blood went cold. "You've been using me as a research subject?" "Not exactly. More like an observation study. We've been tracking your recovery, your cognitive function, your adaptation to injury. Without your knowledge, I'll admit, which is why I'm here now to ask for your consent." "Consent for what?" "Doctor." Reeves pulled out a tablet, brought up medical scans. Monroe recognized her own brain, the characteristic patterns of axonal shearing, the areas of damage that looked like someone had taken an eraser to gray matter. "Your injury was severe. By all rights, you should have permanent cognitive deficits far worse than what you're experiencing. Memory problems, yes. Executive function issues, yes. But you're also showing remarkable neuroplasticity. Your brain is rewiring itself, creating new pathways around the damaged areas. Lots of TBI patients show neuroplasticity. Not like this. Not at your age, not with your severity of injury, and not while under chronic stress." Dr. Reeves swiped through more scans. "We think it's because of your training. Years of operating in high-stress environments, rapid decision-making, cognitive flexibility. It's like you pre-trained your brain to adapt to trauma." Monroe sat down slowly. "So you've been manipulating my situation. Webb, the emergency landing, all of it. You were stress-testing my brain. Webb was already predisposed to target you. We just gave him information that accelerated his timeline. The emergency landing was genuinely random. We tracked it, but didn't create it. What we did was ensure you were on duty when it happened. Why? Because we need to know if you're capable of returning to operational status. Not desk work, not administrative filing. Real operations." Dr. Reeves leaned forward. "Commander, we have a mission, something that requires your specific skill set. But we needed to know if you could still perform under pressure before we could offer it to you." Monroe stood abruptly, chair scraping. "I'm not a lab rat, and I'm not interested in being someone's guinea pig for a Black Ops project, even if it means finding the people responsible for Kandahar." The words hit like a physical blow. Monroe froze. "What?" "The IEDs that killed Doc and Vega. They weren't just sophisticated, they were too sophisticated. Chechnyan design, you said. But our analysis suggests they were designed by someone with Western training, someone who knew exactly how American EOD techs work." Monroe's mind was racing. "You're saying Doc was killed by American-made explosives?" "I'm saying the technology used in those IEDs has markers consistent with devices we've seen in other theaters, devices built by someone with intimate knowledge of our tactics." Dr. Reeves pulled up another file. "We've been tracking this bomb maker for 3 years. He's responsible for at least 40 coalition deaths. And we finally have a lead on his location. Then send a team. DevGru, Delta, whoever. You don't need me. We need someone who understands the psychology. Someone who's been on the receiving end of his work. Someone who can think like he thinks." Dr. Reeves met Monroe's eyes. "We need someone who has skin in the game." Monroe turned away, walked to the window. Outside, the sun was rising over the water, painting everything gold. She thought about Doc's laugh, Vega's quiet competence, the weight of 2 names carved into her memory. "What's the mission?" "Intelligence gathering. We've identified the bomb maker, goes by the alias Architect. He's operating out of Syria now, training insurgents. We need someone to infiltrate his operation, gather evidence, and extract. That's a JSOC mission. Why are you running it through DARPA?" "Because JSOC won't touch it. The Architect has connections to groups we've negotiated with. Going after him would violate peace agreements. But a civilian contractor operating independently." Dr. Reeves smiled without humor. "That's a different story. You want me to go off the books. I want to give you a choice. Stay here, finish your medical separation, accept that Kandahar was just bad luck, or come with us. Help us find the man who killed your teammates and maybe, just maybe, get some closure." Monroe closed her eyes, counted her breaths. 47 in, 47 out. I need to think about it. You have 24 hours. After that, we move without you. Dr. Reeves stood, headed for the door. For what it's worth, Commander, I think you're remarkable. What you've overcome, what you've survived, most people would have broken. You just bent. She left. Monroe stood alone in the comm center, watching the sunrise and trying to figure out if she was being offered redemption or just another way to die. Her phone buzzed. Admiral Cartwright. We tracked Dr. Reeves. Her credentials check out, but her project is buried under so many black classifications we can't verify the mission details. Your call, Commander, but be careful. Monroe pocketed her phone, walked out of the building into morning light that felt too bright, too clean for the decision she was facing. Monday arrived with the bureaucratic machinery of Webb's transfer grinding into motion. Monroe watched from her office as he packed his desk, movements tight with barely controlled rage. At 0900, he stopped by her door. I just want you to know, he said quietly, that I still think you're a fraud. Maybe you fooled them with your rank and your classified file, but I know the truth. You're broken, and you're going to get people killed. Monroe looked up from her paperwork. Maybe, but they'll die following someone who actually cares about them, not someone who uses them to cover his own inadequacy. Webb's jaw worked. Then he turned and left without another word. Bradley appeared in the doorway. That was cold. It was true. Monroe set down her pen. He spent 2 weeks making my life hell because it was easier than admitting he wasn't good at his job. I don't owe him kindness. No, but you might owe yourself mercy. Bradley sat down. I did some reading on TBI recovery. It's not linear. You're going to have good days and bad days. Days where you feel almost normal, and days where you can barely function. You need to prepare for that. I've been living it for 2 years. You've been hiding for 2 years. That's different. Bradley leaned forward. Look, I don't know what that DARPA woman offered you, but whatever it is, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Not revenge, not guilt, not because you think you have something to prove. Monroe met his eyes. What if I'm doing it because it's the only thing that makes sense anymore? Then maybe you need to find a new definition of sense. He left. Monroe returned to her paperwork. Real work now. Actual command responsibilities. Personnel evaluations for Rodriguez and Chen. Budget allocations for the comm center. Operational reports from the weekend's incidents. Normal work. The kind of work that should have felt satisfying but just felt empty. At 1100, Sarah Chen appeared. Not Seaman Chen from the office. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, Monroe's old partner, walking with a pronounced limp and a cane that looked more like a statement than a necessity. Heard you needed someone you trust, Chen said, leaning against the doorframe. Figured I'd volunteer before you picked someone less charming. Monroe stood, came around the desk. They hugged, carefully, both of them carrying injuries that made casual contact complicated. You didn't have to come, Monroe said. Yes, I did. You saved my life in Kandahar. Multiple times. I owe you at least one favor. Chen sat down, stretched out her damaged leg. Plus, I was getting bored. Physical therapy is only interesting for the first 6 months. After that, it's just depressing. How bad is it? Titanium from hip to knee. 23 screws. Nerve damage that means I can't feel my toes but can feel everything else in excruciating detail. Chen smiled. But I can walk, I can work, and I can still drink you under the table, so really I'm winning. Monroe laughed. It felt strange, foreign. I forgot how to do that. Do what? Laugh, feel normal. Exist without counting tiles. 47, Chen said quietly. You're still counting 47. Always. Leah, you need to talk to someone. Real talk, not military psych evaluations. Someone who understands trauma. I have a therapist. Do you actually talk to them, or do you just give them the minimum to check the box? Monroe said nothing, which was answer enough. Chen sighed. Look, I'm not going to lecture you. God knows I spent a year refusing to deal with my own shit. But eventually, you have to process it. You have to let yourself feel the grief instead of just carrying it like a backpack full of rocks. I don't know how. Then learn. Because if you're thinking about taking that DARPA mission, and I know you are, I can see it in your eyes, you need to be mentally solid. Not broken and pretending. Actually solid. Monroe walked back to her desk, sat down. Dr. Reeves said my brain is rewiring itself, creating new pathways. That I'm showing remarkable recovery. That's great. But brains aren't the same as minds. Your neurons might be adapting, but your soul is still carrying Doc and Vega around like corpses. Chen leaned forward. You want to go after the architect? Fine, but do it because it's the right mission. Not because you think killing the person who made the bomb will somehow resurrect the people it killed. What if I can't separate those things? Then you need more time, more therapy, more healing. Chen stood, walked to the window. The architect will still be there in 6 months. Doc and Vega will still be dead. But maybe in 6 months, you'll be strong enough to handle the mission without it destroying you. Monroe wanted to argue, wanted to say she was fine, she was ready, she could handle it. But the words wouldn't come, because Chen was right. I told Dr. Reeves I need to think about it. Good, actually think. Don't just decide and then pretend you thought about it. Chen turned from the window. And Leah, whatever you decide, I'm with you. If you take the mission, I'm coming. If you turn it down, I'll help you find something else. You're not alone anymore. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm expensive. Expect at least 3 fancy dinners and 1 really good bottle of whiskey. They spent the rest of the day working through the office's backlog. Chen had always been good at cutting through bureaucratic nonsense, and she worked through Monroe's to-do list with ruthless efficiency. By 1700, they'd accomplished more than Monroe had managed in 2 weeks. See? Chen said. You're not broken. You're just surrounded by incompetent people who make you feel broken. Monroe wasn't sure that was true, but it was nice to hear. Tuesday morning, Monroe reported to Walter Reed Medical Center, a 3-hour drive from Kitsap, but necessary. Her neurologist, Dr. Patricia Okoye, had requested a follow-up after hearing about the weekend's incidents. Let me get this straight, Dr. Okoye said, reviewing Monroe's chart. You coordinated an emergency aircraft landing, revealed your classified background to multiple people, and are now considering a field operation, all while supposedly recovering from a traumatic brain injury. When you say it like that, it sounds irresponsible. It sounds like someone who isn't taking her recovery seriously. Dr. Okoye set down the chart. Commander, I know you want to return to normal, but your brain isn't normal anymore. It's adapted, yes, but adaptation isn't the same as healing. Dr. Reeves says. I know what Dr. Reeves says. I reviewed her research proposals. DARPA's interested in you because you're an outlier, but being an outlier doesn't mean you're cured. Dr. Okoye pulled up brain scans on her computer. Look at this. These are your scans from 6 months ago. Now look at the scans from last week. Monroe studied the images. Even to her untrained eye, the differences were visible. The areas of damage looked smaller, or maybe just less defined. Your brain is compensating, Dr. Okoye explained. Creating new neural pathways, recruiting undamaged regions to take over functions from damaged ones. It's remarkable, but it's also fragile. Stress can disrupt these new pathways. Trauma can cause regression. You push too hard, too fast, and you risk undoing years of recovery. So what are you saying? That I should just accept being broken forever? I'm saying you need to be realistic about your limitations. You're going to have bad days. Days where your memory fails, where your executive function shuts down, where the headaches are so bad you can't see. If you're in the field when that happens, I'll die, or get someone else killed. Yes. Dr. Okoye leaned back. So the question is this mission worth that risk? Monroe thought about Doc, about Vega, about the architect, whoever he was, training people to build bombs that killed with scientific precision. I don't know yet. Then figure it out before you commit, because once you're out there, there's no calling time out, because your brain needs a rest day. The appointment ended with prescriptions, new medications for the headaches, adjustments to her cognitive therapy schedule, stern warnings about stress management. Monroe drove back to Kitsap feeling more uncertain than when she'd left. Her phone buzzed. Dr. Reeves. Decision time, Commander. We deploy Wednesday at 600. Are you in or out? Monroe pulled into a rest stop, sat in her car staring at the message. 47 tiles, 47 lives. 47 reasons to say yes or no, depending on how you counted. She called Chen. I need you to talk me out of something stupid, Monroe said. I'm listening. The architect. The mission. I want to say yes, but I don't know if I'm doing it for the right reasons. Then let me ask you this, Chen said. If you take this mission and succeed, if you find the architect, gather the evidence, get out clean, what happens then? Do you feel better? Do Doc and Vega come back? Does your brain magically heal? No. Then what do you get out of it? Monroe was quiet for a long time. Finally, I get to stop feeling useless. I get to remember what it was like to be good at something. I get to prove I'm not just broken goods waiting to be discarded. Those are terrible reasons to risk your life. I know. But, Chen continued, they're honest reasons. And honestly, they might be the only reasons you have right now. So here's what I think. Take the mission, but do it with your eyes open. Know that it won't fix you. Know that success won't erase your guilt. Know that you're doing it because you need to do something, not because it's the perfect thing. You're supposed to be talking me out of it. I changed my mind. I think you need this, not because it's smart or safe or healthy, but because sitting behind a desk counting tiles is killing you slower than any bomb could. Monroe closed her eyes. If I do this, I want you on the team. Already packed. Reeves cleared me this morning. Apparently, my psychological profile is acceptably damaged but functional. That's a ringing endorsement. Best I've ever gotten. Chen paused. Leah, whatever happens, we do this together. Like Kandahar, but with better intel and fewer explosives. I'll hold you to that. Monroe hung up, stared at her phone. Then she typed a reply to Dr. Reeves. I'm in, but I want full operational control. My team, my rules, my timeline. Non-negotiable. The response came within seconds. Done. See you Wednesday, Commander. Monroe sat in the rest stop parking lot, watching trucks roll past on the highway. Normal people doing normal work, probably going home to normal families and normal problems. She'd never been normal, and after Kandahar, she'd never be normal again. But maybe she could be useful. Maybe she could be good at something besides filing forms and surviving. Maybe 47 saved could become 48. The math was changing. Wednesday, 05:30. Monroe stood in the parking lot of Building 2477 with a go bag at her feet and uncertainty in her chest. Chen was beside her, leaning on her cane, looking more alive than Monroe had seen her in months. Last chance to back out, Chen said. I could say the same to you. I'm not the one with a brain injury. You're the one with a leg full of metal. Fair point. Chen smiled. We're a matched set. Broken but persistent. A black SUV pulled up. Dr. Reeves got out, followed by two other people, a man in his 40s with operator written all over him, and a younger woman with the intense focus of an intelligence analyst. Commander Monroe, Commander Chen. This is Marcus Chen, no relation, former Delta, now freelance contractor. And this is Dr. Aisha Patel, Middle East specialist and translator. Dr. Reeves gestured to the vehicle. Everyone else is at the staging area. We'll brief in transit. The drive was 2 hours, long enough for Dr. Reeves to lay out the mission in detail. The architect was operating in northern Syria, training local insurgents in advanced IED construction. He'd been flagged by multiple intelligence agencies but never captured because his identity was unknown. All they had was a pattern of attacks, a signature style, and now, finally, a location. The mission is intelligence gathering, Dr. Reeves explained. We need evidence, plans, materials, training documents. Ideally, we get visual confirmation of the architect himself. Once we have that, we extract and turn everything over to JSOC. Why not just take him out? Marcus asked. Because we need to know who he is, who trained him, who's funding him. If we kill him without intel, the network continues. If we expose the network, we can dismantle the whole operation. Monroe studied the aerial photos of the compound. Single-story structure, 3 rooms, 1 entrance. Guard schedule showed 2-person rotation every 6 hours. Interior layout was unknown. How do we get inside? She asked. We don't. We set up surveillance in the adjacent building, abandoned warehouse, and watch for 3 days. Document everyone who comes and goes. Record conversations. Identify the architect. Dr. Reeves zoomed in on the warehouse. It's not glamorous, but it's effective. And if something goes wrong, then we abort and extract. This is intelligence gathering, not direct action. We get in, we observe, we get out. Monroe wanted to believe it would be that simple. But missions were never that simple. There were always complications, always variables that couldn't be planned for. What's the backup plan? If we're compromised, we have a safe house 3 clicks north. Local contact will provide transport. We cross into Turkey and exfil from there. And if we can't reach the safe house? Dr. Reeves met Monroe's eyes. Then we improvise. Like Kandahar. The words hung in the air. Chen shifted uncomfortably. Marcus looked confused. He didn't know the story. That's not encouraging, Monroe said quietly. It's realistic. You know as well as I do that no plan survives contact with reality. What matters is the team. And this team is good. They arrived at the staging area, a private airfield outside Seattle. A Cessna was waiting, props already turning. The kind of aircraft that didn't show up on official manifests, flown by pilots who didn't ask questions. Monroe boarded with her team. As the plane lifted off, she looked down at Kitsap, at the base that had been her prison for 2 weeks and her proving ground for 3 days. Bradley was down there somewhere, probably wondering if she'd made the right choice. Webb was in Norfolk, probably still angry. Hayworth and Rodriguez were in the office, probably grateful she was gone. And Monroe was in the air, heading toward a country where people were actively trying to kill Americans, carrying a brain injury and survivor's guilt, and a desperate need to prove she was still worth something. "You okay?" Chen asked. Monroe realized she'd been gripping the armrest hard enough to turn her knuckles white. Just thinking. About Doc and Vega. Always. They'd want you to be careful. They'd want me to finish the mission. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Monroe relaxed her grip. "I know, but careful doesn't feel like enough anymore." The plane climbed higher, leaving American airspace behind. Monroe closed her eyes, counted her breaths, and tried not to think about how many ways this could go wrong. 47 in, 47 out. The math was about to be tested. The mission timeline was compressed. They landed in Turkey, transferred to a cargo truck that crossed into Syria under the guise of humanitarian aid. By Thursday evening, they were in position in the warehouse. Surveillance equipment set up, sight lines established. The compound was quiet. 2 guards visible, both bored, both smoking cigarettes that glowed in the darkness. Monroe watched through night vision, cataloging details. AK pattern rifles, Chinese manufacture, civilian clothes, not uniforms, communications via handheld radios, no encryption, amateur hour, which made her nervous. The architect's work was professional. So why were his security measures so lax? "Maybe he doesn't think anyone's looking for him," Marcus suggested. "Or maybe he's confident enough not to care," Monroe countered. They settled into watch rotation. 4 hours on, 4 hours off. Monroe took first watch with Dr. Patel, who proved to be both sharp-eyed and conversationally restrained, exactly what Monroe needed. At 2300, activity increased. A vehicle arrived, an old Toyota pickup. 3 men got out, carrying equipment into the compound. Monroe photographed them, ran facial recognition through the portable system Dr. Reeves had provided. "No hits," Dr. Patel said, reviewing the results. "Either they're clean or they're off-grid, or they're ghosts like I was," Monroe said. The men emerged 20 minutes later, drove away. The compound returned to stillness. Monroe's watch ended at 300. She woke Chen for relief, then tried to sleep on a bedroll that smelled like dust and diesel. Sleep was elusive. The warehouse was too quiet, too exposed. Every sound made her hyper-aware. Footsteps, wind, the distant rumble of vehicles. She thought about Dr. Okoye's warnings, about bad days and fragile neural pathways, about what would happen if her brain decided to short-circuit in the middle of an operation. You push too hard, too fast, and you risk undoing years of recovery. At 05:30, her phone buzzed. She turned it off before deployment, but apparently it had turned itself back on. One message from Admiral Cartwright. "Mission is not sanctioned by JSOC. If you're captured, we cannot extract you. Be smart, Commander." Monroe deleted the message, turned off the phone for real this time, removed the battery for good measure. She was on her own now, just like Kandahar. The thought should have scared her. Instead, it felt familiar, almost comfortable. Friday morning brought the architect. Monroe was on watch with Marcus when the black Mercedes pulled up. One man got out, tall, maybe 6'2", wearing Western clothes but moving with the caution of someone who'd spent time in conflict zones. He carried a briefcase which seemed absurdly professional for a bomb maker in northern Syria. "That's him," Marcus said quietly. "Has to be." Monroe photographed him from 8 angles. Facial recognition spun for 30 seconds, then returned results. Karim al-Rashid, former Syrian Army, EOD specialist. Trained at US Army School of Explosive Ordnance Disposal, 2007-2008. Monroe's blood went cold. "He's American trained." "Jesus," Marcus breathed. "We trained the guy who's killing us." Monroe photographed the ID, the training records, everything the database provided. Al-Rashid had been part of a coalition program, training Allied forces in bomb disposal. He'd received top marks, spent 18 months working with American units, then disappeared when the Syrian civil war started. "He knows our tactics because we taught him our tactics," Monroe said, "which is why he's so good at killing us." Marcus checked his watch. "Do we extract now? We've got positive ID." "Not yet. Reeves wants documentation, plans, materials, training methods. We watch, we record, we collect evidence." Al-Rashid entered the compound. For the next 6 hours, Monroe and her team documented everything. Men coming and going, equipment being delivered. At one point, Al-Rashid stood outside with what looked like a circuit board, explaining something to 2 students who took notes. Dr. Patel recorded the conversation. Translated later. He's teaching them about dual triggers, how to make bombs that defeat American EOD protocols. Monroe thought about Doc, working so carefully to disarm the primary device, not knowing there was a secondary system designed to kill people exactly like him. "Got it all recorded?" she asked. "Every word. Every image. This is enough to prosecute." "Good. We extract tonight." But at 1800, the situation changed. A military convoy arrived. 6 vehicles, 24 fighters, all heavily armed. They surrounded the compound, efficient and professional. Monroe's stomach dropped. "That's not insurgents," Marcus said. "That's a military unit. Syrian army," Dr. Patel confirmed. Al-Rashid is working with state actors, which meant this wasn't just a bomb maker training terrorists. This was government-sanctioned weapons development, which meant international law, treaties, political complications. "We need to extract now," Monroe said. "This just became bigger than us." Dr. Reeves agreed. They packed equipment, erased their presence, prepared to move. The plan was simple. Wait until dark, slip out the back of the warehouse, make their way to the safe house. But at 1930, before they could move, someone knocked on the warehouse door. Everyone froze. Marcus and Chen drew weapons. Monroe moved to the window, peered through a crack. 2 Syrian soldiers stood outside, not threatening, just waiting. "They know we're here," Monroe whispered. "How?" Chen hissed. "Doesn't matter. We need options." Marcus pointed to the back exit. "We go now, fast and quiet. Leave the equipment." "No," Monroe was thinking, calculating. "If they knew we were hostile, they'd have surrounded the building. They're just checking. We bluff." "Bluff how?" "We're humanitarian workers. Lost. Looking for a place to stay." Monroe straightened, adjusted her headscarf. She'd been dressed as a local NGO worker for cover. "Dr. Patel, you're with me. Everyone else, pack up and be ready to run." She opened the door before anyone could argue. The 2 soldiers looked surprised. One said something in Arabic. Fast, aggressive. Dr. Patel responded, her tone apologetic, hands spread in a universal gesture of harmlessness. Monroe understood maybe 1 word in 3, but she could read body language. The soldiers were suspicious but not actively hostile. They wanted to know what Western women were doing in a restricted area. Dr. Patel explained, medical supplies, lost convoy, seeking shelter for the night. The story was thin, but delivered with enough confidence that the soldiers hesitated. Then Al-Rashid appeared. He walked across the compound yard, approached the soldiers, said something that made them step aside. Then he looked directly at Monroe. "You're American," he said in perfect English. "I can tell by the way you stand." "Military?" Monroe's heart was pounding. "Humanitarian worker. We got separated from our convoy." "You're lying." Al-Rashid smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "But I appreciate the effort. The question is, what kind of American? Intelligence? Special operations? Or just unlucky civilians in the wrong place?" Monroe met his eyes. Saw recognition there, not of her face, but of what she was. Operator, recognizing operator. "We're leaving," she said quietly. "I don't think so." Al-Rashid gestured and 6 more soldiers appeared, weapons raised. "I think you're going to come inside. Tell me who sent you, and then we'll decide what to do with you." Marcus and Chen appeared in the doorway, weapons up. The soldiers aimed back. Mexican standoff, everyone with their finger on the trigger. "Stand down," Monroe said to her team. "That's an order. Commander, stand down." Monroe turned back to Al-Rashid. "We're not combatants. We're intelligence gathering. You let us go, we disappear. Nobody dies tonight. Except I can't let you go. You've seen too much." Al-Rashid's expression was almost regretful. "You understand. Operational security." Monroe understood. She also understood that in about 10 seconds, this was going to turn into a firefight that would kill half the people in this courtyard. And then her head exploded. Not literally, but it felt literal. The headache came like a thunderclap, like someone had driven a spike through her skull. Her vision whited out. Balance deserted her. She collapsed. Monroe woke in a cell. Concrete floor, metal door, no windows. Her head was still pounding, but the worst of the pain had passed. She sat up slowly, counted her body parts. Everything present and functional. Chen was beside her, unconscious but breathing. Marcus and Dr. Patel were in the corner, awake, watching her with expressions somewhere between concern and frustration. "What happened?" Monroe managed. "You passed out," Marcus said, "right in the middle of negotiations. Al-Rashid had his men bring us here. We've been here for about 3 hours. Monroe closed her eyes. "You pushed too hard, too fast." Dr. Okoye's warning, coming true at the worst possible moment. "I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just tell me, is this a regular thing? Because if you're going to collapse every time the pressure ramps up, I need to know." "It's not regular. It's—" Monroe struggled for words. "It's a possibility. The TBI makes me vulnerable to stress. Too much cortisol, too much adrenaline, and my brain just shuts down." "Great. Fucking great." Marcus ran his hands through his hair. "So we're captured because your brain decided to take a vacation." "Marcus," Dr. Patel said quietly, not helping. "I'm not trying to help. I'm trying to figure out how we get out of a locked room in a hostile compound because our team leader is medically unfit for duty." The words stung because they were true. Monroe had known the risk, had taken the mission anyway, and now her team was captured because she'd been too stubborn to admit her limitations. Chen stirred, opened her eyes. "Did I miss something?" "Everything," Monroe said. "We're prisoners. Al-Rashid has us locked up, and it's my fault." "Okay." Chen sat up carefully. "So let's figure out how to fix it." "How?" "We're locked in, no weapons, no comms. Best case, they keep us prisoner. Worst case, we end up on a propaganda video before they execute us." "Third option," Chen said. "We escape." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I know giving up isn't an option. So we start with what we have. 4 people, 1 room, and the element of them not expecting us to try anything because you're injured and I'm crippled." Marcus almost smiled. "They're going to underestimate us." "Exactly. So we use that." For the next hour, they planned. The door was locked from outside, but the hinges were visible. Inside mounting, which meant they could potentially remove the pins. The walls were concrete, but the ceiling was corrugated metal held by rusted screws. They had the wire from Dr. Patel's bra. Could be used as a makeshift tool. Chen's cane had a metal tip, could be removed and sharpened. Marcus had kept his belt, which had a concealed handcuff key sewn into the leather. Operator tricks. The kind of thing that looked like paranoia until it became necessity. At 2200, they heard footsteps outside. The door opened. Al-Rashid entered, flanked by 2 guards. "I've been reviewing your equipment," he said. "Very sophisticated. Satellite uplink, facial recognition, encrypted comms. You're not just intelligence, you're running a targeted operation against me specifically." Monroe said nothing. "I'm curious why." "I'm careful. I don't leave evidence. My work is clean." Al-Rashid sat down, somehow making the concrete floor look comfortable. "So, how did you find me?" "Pattern recognition," Monroe said. "Your devices have signatures, specific design choices that show up across multiple theaters." "Interesting. And who are you, specifically?" "Your identification says humanitarian worker, but we both know that's false." "Commander Leah Monroe, Naval Intelligence, retired." "Retired?" Al-Rashid studied her. "You're young for retirement. Medical?" "Something like that." "Combat injury?" Monroe met his eyes. "Traumatic brain injury. Courtesy of one of your devices in Kandahar province, 2011. Al-Rashid's expression shifted. "Kandahar, the compound extraction. 47 rescued, 2 killed." He paused. "That was my work." "I know. Then you know I'm very good at what I do. The primary IED was a decoy. The secondary system was the real weapon designed to kill the EOD tech who thought he'd neutralized the threat." Al-Rashid's voice carried professional pride. It was elegant, precise, exactly what I was paid to create. Monroe's hands were shaking, not from the TBI, from rage. 2 good men died, men with families, futures. You killed them for money. I killed them because I'm a soldier. Same as you. We just fight for different sides. Al-Rashid stood. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm here to offer you a choice. Tell me who sent you, the whole chain from funding to operational control, and I'll let your team go. You stay as insurance. They're free. No deal. Commander, be reasonable. Your team has families too. Dr. Patel has a daughter in Michigan. Marcus has a sister in Texas. Commander Chen has parents in California. They all go home. You stay. Simple mathematics. The same mathematics Monroe had used in Kandahar. 47 saved, 2 lost. Except this time, she was the 2. What happens to me? You become a guest of the Syrian government. Eventual prisoner exchange, maybe. Or you disappear. Depends on how valuable you are. Monroe looked at her team. Chen was shaking her head. Marcus looked torn. Dr. Patel was openly crying. No, Monroe said. No, we escape together or we die together. I'm not sacrificing my team to save myself. Even though staying here is killing you. I can see it, Commander. The tremor in your hands. The pallor of your skin. You're barely holding on. How long before your brain shuts down again? Days? Hours? Long enough. Al-Rashid sighed. Americans. So committed to dying with honor instead of living with compromise. He walked to the door. You have until morning. Then I'll make the decision for you. He left. The door locked behind him. Chen spoke first. You shouldn't have said no. I'm not sacrificing you. We're not asking you to. We're asking you to be practical. If you stay, we can get help. If we all stay, we all die. Or we all escape. How? Marcus demanded. Doors locked. Guards outside. We have no weapons. And you can barely stand without passing out. Then we make weapons. We improvise. We do what operators do. We adapt. They worked through the night. Used Dr. Patel's wire to remove door hinge pins. Halfway done when the guards changed shift and they had to stop. Sharpened Chen's cane tip against the concrete floor. Planned a distraction that would draw the guards inside where they could be overpowered. It was desperate. It was dangerous. It probably wouldn't work. But it was better than surrender. At 0600, footsteps approached. Multiple sets. More than just guards. Monroe and her team positioned themselves. Marcus by the door, Chen near the corner with her sharpened cane, Dr. Patel ready to create a distraction. Monroe stood in the center, trying to look weak and helpless. Not hard, given how she actually felt. The door opened. Al-Rashid entered, followed by 4 guards. And behind them, Admiral Cartwright. Monroe's mind went blank with confusion. Cartwright was in full-dress uniform, flanked by 2 U.S. Marines. He looked angry enough to melt steel. Commander Monroe, he said coldly, you are under arrest for unauthorized military action in violation of international law. Monroe couldn't process words. Sir, what? Be quiet. You'll speak when I tell you to speak. Cartwright turned to Al-Rashid. As we discussed, my personnel, my custody. Al-Rashid smiled. Of course, Admiral. International cooperation. Though I'm curious, what will happen to them? Court-martial, dishonorable discharge, possibly prison time, depending on evidence. Cartwright gestured to the Marines. Restrain them. The Marines moved forward with zip ties. Monroe's team looked as confused as she felt. This didn't make sense. Cartwright was here, yes, but why would he? Then she saw it. The slight tension around Cartwright's eyes. The way his hand tapped his thigh in a pattern. Morse code, barely visible. Play along. This was theater, a performance. Monroe let the Marines zip-tie her wrists, watched as they did the same to her team. All of them standing, processing, trusting that Cartwright had a plan. Al-Rashid walked them outside. Dawn was breaking, painting the compound in shades of gold. 3 U.S. military vehicles were waiting, real ones, proper markings, legitimate. How did you manage the diplomatic clearance so quickly? Al-Rashid asked. My government wants this incident buried, bad for relations. Cartwright opened the lead vehicle's door. Load them up. The Marines guided Monroe and her team into the vehicles. As they pulled away, Monroe watched Al-Rashid standing in the compound yard, satisfied that he'd negotiated a win. 10 minutes later, safely out of sight, Cartwright cut their zip ties. What the hell was that? Marcus demanded. That was me saving your asses. Cartwright handed Monroe a bottle of water. Dr. Reeves contacted me when you went dark. I pulled every favor I had to arrange diplomatic access and a cover story. As far as the Syrian government knows, you were unauthorized actors and I'm bringing you home for punishment. How did you? I've been doing this for 30 years, Commander. I know how to negotiate with people who want to save face. Cartwright looked at Monroe. But this operation is burned. Al-Rashid knows you were targeting him. He'll disappear within hours. Everything you risked, everything you gathered, it's all compromised. Monroe closed her eyes. I'm sorry, sir. Sorry doesn't cut it. You disobeyed medical advice, undertook an unauthorized mission, and nearly got your team killed. Cartwright's voice was steel. Give me one reason I shouldn't end your career right now. Monroe had no answer. Because he was right. Chen spoke instead. Because she's the only reason we got any intel at all. Because she made decisions under pressure that saved lives, even when her brain was literally failing. Because she's the best operator I've ever seen, even broken. That's not a reason. That's sentiment. It's truth, sir. Chen met his eyes. You want to end her career? Fine. But do it knowing you're throwing away someone who still has more to give than most people at full strength. Cartwright was quiet for a long moment. Finally, we're going to Turkey. You'll debrief with JSOC. They'll decide what happens next. Until then, you're all on administrative status. No missions, no operations, no heroics. Yes, sir. They drove in silence. Monroe stared out the window, watching Syria fade into distance. She'd come here looking for closure, for redemption, for proof she could still be useful. Instead, she'd proven al-Rashid right. She was broken, and broken things broke everyone around them. The math hadn't changed. It had gotten worse. 3 months later, Monroe stood in a small office in downtown Seattle, staring at a whiteboard covered in names. 47 names to be precise. Some she knew. The HVT family from Kandahar, members of the QRF who'd been staged nearby. Others were strangers. Soldiers who'd been in adjacent buildings, contractors working logistics, even 2 CIA analysts who'd been coordinating from a safe house 3 blocks away. 47 people alive because of a choice she'd made. 47 people who probably didn't know her name. You're doing it again, Chen said from the doorway. She traded her cane for a more discreet knee brace, though Monroe knew she still needed the cane on bad days. Doing what? Counting, obsessing, martyring yourself. Chen walked into the room. Their room now, office space for the nonprofit they'd somehow created in the aftermath of Syria. How many times do I have to tell you? 47 is a good number. Stop trying to make it a bad one. Monroe turned from the board. The office was small, 1 room in a shared workspace building, furniture from IKEA, a coffee maker that actually worked. Nothing like the bureaucratic nightmare of Naval Station Kitsap. Nothing like the sterile efficiency of military offices. It felt almost human. JSOC closed the investigation, Monroe said, changing the subject. Cartwright called this morning. They're classifying the Syria operation as unauthorized civilian contractor activity. No charges, no courts-martial. We just disappear from the official record. Like ghosts, Chen said. Like ghosts. Fitting, for someone whose call sign was Phantom. Chen sat down at one of the 2 desks. Hers was already cluttered with papers, coffee cups, and a framed photo of her family. Monroe's desk was bare except for a laptop and the bottle of headache medication she went through every week. So what now? We successfully avoided prison. What do we do with our freedom? Monroe gestured to the whiteboard. This? We find them. All 47. We tell them what happened. We connect them to resources, VA support, therapy, advocacy. We build a network. The Phantom Support Network, Chen said, testing the words. I like it. Pretentious enough to sound official, vague enough to avoid explaining classified operations. Dr. Patel already registered the nonprofit paperwork. Marcus is handling security consulting to keep us funded. You and I run day-to-day operations, such as, Monroe pulled up a file on her laptop, such as Julia Freeman, former Apache pilot 32, currently fighting the VA for TBI benefits they keep denying because her injury isn't service-connected, despite medical records proving otherwise. Or Rachel Kim, Marine Corps veteran, sexually assaulted by her platoon sergeant. Trauma so severe she can't hold a job, but VA psych services have a 6-month wait list. Chen read through the files, her expression darkening. How did you find these cases? I asked around. Put out word through veteran networks. Turns out there are a lot of us. People who served, got broken, and discovered the system designed to help us is actually designed to process us. Monroe closed the laptop. We can't fix the system, but maybe we can help individuals navigate it. That's ambitious for 2 broken women with limited resources. It's all I've got. Chen studied Monroe for a long moment. You're not doing this just to help them. You're doing this to prove you're not useless. Is that such a bad motivation? No, it's just incomplete. You're still looking for external validation that you have worth. You should try finding internal validation instead. Monroe almost smiled. When did you become a therapist? When I spent 3 months in physical therapy listening to other people's pain and realizing we're all just trying to prove we're not broken. Chen stood. I'm going for coffee. Want anything? Something with enough caffeine to kill a small horse. Got it. One death wish. Coming up. Chen left. Monroe returned to the whiteboard, staring at the 47 names. She'd spent weeks tracking them down, verifying identities, figuring out who they were and where they'd ended up. Some were still active duty. Some had transitioned to civilian life successfully. 3 were dead, 2 from combat and subsequent deployments, 1 from suicide. 44 alive. The math kept changing. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Monroe almost didn't answer. She'd had enough of mysterious messages. But something made her pick up. Commander Monroe. The voice was male, older, with a Texas drawl. This is Staff Sergeant Miguel Santos. I was in Kandahar, August 2011. The compound extraction. Monroe's breath caught. I remember. You were QRF, stage 3 blocks out. Yes, ma'am. I've been trying to find you for 2 years. I wanted to say thank you. That night, when you made the call to let Doc try to disarm instead of control DEET, you saved my life, and 38 others. We all knew it. We just never got to tell you. Monroe sat down slowly. You don't need to thank me. I was doing my job. Your job got Doc and Vega killed, but it also saved us. And I know you've been carrying that guilt. I can hear it in your voice, ma'am. So I'm calling to tell you, we don't blame you. None of us. We're alive because you made a hard call in an impossible situation. 2 men died, and 47 lived. I've got 3 kids now, ma'am. They exist because you chose their father's life over perfect safety. Doc had a wife. She misses him every day, but she knows he died doing what he loved. Vega's parents. They struggled, but they've found peace. You're the only one still torturing yourself. Monroe couldn't speak, couldn't process this. I'm in Seattle, Santos continued. Heard you're starting some kind of support network. I want to help. I work in veteran services, know the system. I can connect you with people who need help, show you how to navigate the bureaucracy. Why would you do that? Because you saved my life, ma'am. This is how I repay that debt. Plus my oldest daughter wants to join the Navy. I want her to have people like you in her corner if things go wrong. They talked for 20 more minutes. By the time Monroe hung up, her face was wet with tears. She hadn't realized she'd cried. Chen returned with coffee, took one look at Monroe, and simply sat beside her in silence. One of the 47 called. Monroe said eventually, "What did he say?" "That they don't blame me. That I should stop blaming myself." "Smart man. I don't know how to stop." "Then don't. Not yet. Just redirect it. Channel that energy into helping people instead of hurting yourself." Chen handed over the coffee. It was actually good coffee. The kind that cost too much but tasted like life. You know what Doc would say if he were here? He'd say I'm being an idiot. He'd say you're honoring his sacrifice by using what you learned from it. He'd say 47 is a hell of a scoreboard. And he'd tell you to stop counting bodies and start counting wins. Monroe sipped her coffee. I'm going to therapy. Real therapy. Doctor. Bradley recommended someone. A psychologist who specializes in TBI and PTSD, works with veterans, understands the military culture. That's good. First session is tomorrow. I'm terrified. Also good. Therapy should be terrifying. Means you're doing it right. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking expensive coffee in a cheap office, planning how to help people they'd never met because someone had to, and they were the ones stubborn enough to try. Monroe's phone buzzed again. This time it was Admiral Cartwright. Heard about your nonprofit. Good work, Commander. If you need any doors opened, let me know. But Monroe, this doesn't erase Syria. You still overstepped. You still endangered your team. Don't mistake permission to help veterans for permission to go rogue again. Monroe showed the message to Chen. He's not wrong, Chen said. Syria was a disaster. We got lucky Cartwright had connections. Next time, we might not. There won't be a next time. I'm done with field operations. My brain can't handle it. Your brain is fine. It's your judgment that's compromised. Chen set down her coffee. You want to help people? Great. But do it through official channels. Build partnerships with the VA. Work with veteran service organizations. Lobby Congress for better policies. Don't go cowboy and think you can fix everything alone. When did you get so wise? When I watched you almost get us all killed because you were more committed to redemption than reality. Chen's voice was gentle but firm. I love you, Leah. You're my best friend, my partner, the person I trust most in the world. But you've got to stop trying to die heroically to make up for surviving. Monroe nodded. I'm working on it. Work faster, because I need you alive and functional. This nonprofit isn't going to run itself. The therapy session the next day was exactly as terrifying as Monroe had anticipated. Dr. Sandra Mitchell was in her 50s, a former Army psychologist who'd transitioned to civilian practice specifically to help veterans. Her office was deliberately unmilitary: soft lighting, comfortable chairs, a coffee table instead of a desk, creating distance.